and Ferrario are broadcasting live from the E&B Granite Studios at the Centene Community Ice Center on 101 ESPN. E&B Granite, Bernie Fedurko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring.
It's a Friday here on BK and Ferrario. Welcome, everyone, inside our E&B Granite Studios at the Centene Community Ice Center. We are live up on our YouTube channel at 101 ESPN STL. The Air Comfort Service text line is rolling, 314-399-9646. And the man, the myth, the legend, T-Bone is back with us. 2 days off, and this man probably has just not seen anything other than darkness, and I would imagine ceramic in your bathroom. It's just, or porcelain? It's porcelain, not ceramic, unless you have a ceramic toilet. Yeah. It's been a rough couple of days, T-Bone. How are you?
I've been better. But I'm back in the saddle, ready to go for Friday, ready to kick this off. I know I missed a lot while I was gone. Army had a press conference.
Yeah.
Cardinals still haven't done anything.
Well, that one was expected.
A lot with them,
yeah, that one wasn't expected.
A lot of ish going on. The Blues core must stink. Springfield must stink, too. Sod doesn't even want to go there.
I still don't think that was Brandon Sod not wanting to go into Springfield. I think that was Brandon Sod's wife not wanting him to be gone for the next 3 months.
I scheduled a trip just to figure out if it is as bad as, there's 4.5 million reasons not to go.
T-Bone's going to find that one out. Well, he's off and running with us. We're off and running. The Blues are back in action tonight. An odd 3 days off for this Blues team. And as T-Bone mentioned, a lot going on since they have last played. When they played Monday against the Vancouver Canucks, tonight they take on the Colorado Avalanche. And I want to start with some news from Elliotte Friedman. And this isn't just pertaining to the Blues, it's pertaining to the National Hockey League. Elliotte Friedman, about 45 minutes ago, tweeted out that the NHL and the NHLPA have released cap estimates for the next 3 seasons. It's going up to $95.5 million next year, sitting at about $88 million right now. The following year, it will go up to $104 million. And then in the 27-28 season, so 3 years from now, the salary cap in the NHL is expected to rise to $113 million. And quick math for you all right now, it's about $25 million compared to where they're at right now versus where they're going to be in 3 years. Bumps up to about $7 million next year, and then another $9 million, and then another $9 million. And T-Bone, my first reaction when I saw Elliotte Friedman tweet this one out was this salary cap rise puts the Blues in a great spot for what they're going to try and accomplish this offseason. And I know it sounds crazy, but we have talked so much, and I think after Doug Armstrong's press conference on Tuesday discussing the state of this team, hearing the same issues over and over and over, they're about to play their final 31 games of the regular season. And if you're in the playoffs or if you're not in the playoffs, the salary cap rise provides the Blues for an opportunity if they need to do a shakeup, because you're not tight with your salary cap anymore. You're not in a position where you look at this and say, well, we have no wiggle room, so unless we're putting money in, we've got to move money out. Now they're in a spot where they just saved $4.5 million next year. They've got everybody locked up that they need to worry about going into next season. The Blues can look at this roster at the end of this year, or maybe at the trade deadline, and say, this isn't good enough, we need a major change. And frankly, I think that is the best case scenario for St. Louis.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, it gives you 2 different ways to go through a major shakeup, right? You can potentially move some bad contracts off the books. Becomes a lot easier the more and more the cap goes up, because you were looking at something right before we went on air that was kind of showing you like, hey, an $8 million contract now, when the cap goes up, will be worth like $5 million.
Yeah, so Jay Fresh put this one out, and it was just kind of like a projections chart of what the salary cap hit rate is now compared to what it will be in 3 years. So when the cap goes up to $113 million, currently a cap hit is 9.1% of a team's salary cap, a player that's making $8 million. And so that's Thomas, that's Kyrou. So they're combining for about 18% of your salary cap. 3 years from now, those two players are going to combine for 14% of your salary cap. $8 million now, if you go back 3 years ago, is about a $5 million cap hit to the salary cap. So they're in a great position with the contracts that they have. The real question that we all have following that game on Tuesday, or the press conference on Tuesday, is do they have the right personnel in the locker room?
Yeah, and when you get those numbers that go up like that, now you can make those kind of moves, right? Whether it is the bad contract, like I'm looking at Justin Falk, or if you're looking for a core shakeup in Robert Thomas or a Kyrou or a Pavel Buchnevich. It's easier to move that, more cap space for more teams. Maybe you don't have to throw in as much of an asset to try and make that move. Or the other way you could look at it, too, is, hey, now you got more money to potentially spend if you're the St. Louis Blues. We went through, looked at kind of what the next couple off seasons look like for free agents. You know, this next class, not that great. But 2 years from now, there's a couple big names out there. Maybe you can go out and finally make that splash that we've been talking about. I know the Blues want to build more pack mentality, go back to how they were doing it in 2019, 2020. But I think they need a superstar. And I wonder if this is going to be the move where Army does a little bit of both, right? Kind of pulls from the core a little bit while also saying, hey, we need to go out and make a big splash, go get that elite winger that we can put right next to Robert Thomas.
Yeah, well, and we got this text on Air Comfort Service text line from Mahomes' long body saying, so some of these long, expensive contracts aren't going to be as bad as we thought. Absolutely. Whether you think the $8 million are bad contracts for a Buchnevich or a Robert Thomas or a Jordan Kyrou, or, like T-Bone just mentioned, the $6.5 million of a Justin Falk going into next season and the season beyond. You're talking about a 6% hit towards your cap, a 5% hit on your cap for those two players. It's the equivalent of about $4.1 million of a cap hit. So you're paying a defenseman who maybe you don't think is living up to the contract. It starts to get watered down a little bit more to where you look at it and you say, well, that's not handcuffing the Blues like it was 2 or 3 years ago, which does present really good opportunities for the Blues. We talked yesterday, T-Bone, about Elias Pettersson, how I'm starting to kind of convince myself that maybe they need to go after that if there's a massive shakeup. Oh. And the only reason I brought that up is because Harmon Dayal of The Athletic put the Blues into that context, saying, look, if they need a roster shakeup, maybe they go after an Elias Pettersson or a JT Miller. But because the salary cap is going up, and really because the Blues got their due diligence done this season, they get Holloway and Broberg on those 2-year bridge deals from the offer sheet. Well, you don't have to worry about them until the 26-27 season. They're under contract. They already extended Jake Neighbors. The only UFAs on this team are Tyler Tucker, Ryan Suter, and Radek Faksa. And honestly, if they want those guys, I don't think it's going to be that much of an issue to bring them back in terms of price. Same can be said about Joel Hofer, who's an RFA. So they don't have a glaring hole on their team that they say, we've got to upgrade this. So with that found cap space that you're going to have, which JR projected yesterday in his Athletic piece, have about $10 million in cap space with the cap expected to go up, and who knows what happens with some of the roster players. That does provide you an opportunity to look at your team and say, okay, we need a change, and it's not as outlandish to think about bringing in an $8, $9, or $10 million contract because of this salary cap going up.
Yeah, and I'll be interested to see, like, when Army has these conversations in the offseason, do they kind of go more towards what you're talking about there, like going more towards those higher-end guys? Or do they still say, hey, look, we still got to build this pack mentality. We still believe in our core a little bit. And the other thing that makes this interesting, you mentioned, kind of the value of some of these long-term contracts, how they look a little better just because of, hey, a guy like Braden Shen, originally when the cap wasn't going up and he wasn't playing well, you're looking at it going, we got this guy on a long-term deal sitting here at $6.5 million and he's got no trade protection. Well, he's played better, but also that number looks really good now with the cap starting to explode up. But what will make it really interesting for Army in the decision-making of if they did do some kind of core shakeup is, hey, man, even Buch, if he struggles at $8 million, Pavel Buchnevich is a pretty good price at that point for the cap exploding at $8 million. Same for a Robert Thomas. Same with a Jordan Kyrou. And potentially same for Dylan Holloway. My assumption is you mentioned those guys. You try and get them signed to a contract extension this coming offseason when you can, because the cap continues to go up, and if they just keep waiting it out, the more and more their price tag goes up. So it's going to be interesting to see how Army takes advantage of this. I feel like we've had this conversation a couple of times. Yeah. And we haven't seen the Blues be able to make anything happen of it yet, but it has never exploded like this with the cap. When it goes up, remember like a couple of years ago we go, $1 million, holy cow.
What can they do with that?
We're living large. The Blues, they're going to be able to do anything they want. This is a little different. This is a significant boost.
It really is. And so let me put this into a little bit better perspective in terms of the cap hit. So in 3 years, which I know, we're talking 3 years from now, and the problems are right now for the Blues, but like we just mentioned, next season, season isn't really that much of an issue. They've got everybody locked up. It's the following season, the 26-27 year, that's when things start to get interesting because Broberg and Holloway need new contracts, and those are going to be the big pieces. But salary cap hits 7.6% because of this cap rise. So basically what Jordan Kyrou, Robert Thomas, and Pavel Buchnevich are impacting your roster as, it's the same as Braden Shen is right now. He's 7.4% cap hit. Justin Falk, who's making $6.5 million, that's a 5% cap hit. That's the equivalent of what Philip Broberg is impacting their roster right now. So it doesn't hurt their team as much. The question is what's out there that they can try and make shakeups with, because the text line brings up a great point. As much as we can sit there and say, well, yeah, now they'll have money to go out there and be aggressive with players, so will a lot of other teams. And that means guys like Mitch Marner, Mikko Rantanen, they start looking at this as cool, $13 million, $14 million, because they know the cap's going up. So it's a give and take. You don't just get to go out there and say, we'll give you $9 million because the cap's going up. Those players are going to want more money. The real question, too, is who's out there that's worth extending yourself for with the shakeup? And this is the part that I just don't know right now, because free agent-wise, you're talking about a couple players. Marner, Rantanen, do you want to go down that path? I don't know if that's the shakeup this Blues team needs until they figure out what their core problem is, and that's what you're about to find out over this next 6-game stretch. We talked about it on Wednesday, T-Bone. Doug Armstrong kind of sent the firing or the first shot, warning shot out to his team. You've got 6 games with 3 days off since your last game to go out there and change the mindset of a lot of people that are looking at this Blues team. Starts tonight against Colorado. You got Colorado, who's a playoff team, Utah, who plays you like they're a playoff team, Florida and Edmonton, and then Chicago. You play a lot of teams that are expected to compete in the playoffs right now. This is going to be a real telltale sign of who the Blues are. It's going to be a prove-it moment for all of them after Doug Armstrong spoke with the media. Do they go on a little bit of a run to change your minds, or do you still get the same things as he's observing this roster?
Yeah, and I heard Joey today on TMA say something. You know, he said, I think it was Tim or Martin, one of them asked him, hey, like, what's the vibe around the team right now? And he said it feels like the trade deadline, where everybody's kind of on pins and needles. And we're not even at the Four Nations break.
Yeah.
And I thought Joey said it best. You know, I to your point of like, hey, you're going to find out about this core. Look, you can either take this moment from Doug Armstrong and say, you know what, we got to go prove him wrong. You know what, it is our fault. Let's get out there. We got to go bust our ass here for the next 4 games. Make sure that we set ourselves up well, because let's just be honest, they probably need to win all 4 going into this Four Nations break. Or you already see them give up, right? You see them go into Colorado tonight. You know, they say all the right things in the media, and then they go out there and lay another egg against Colorado.
Yeah.
That is totally in the range of outcomes, not just because, A, we've seen it, but B, we've seen, I mean, you've talked about it. This team seems mentally fragile. So I could see a scenario where they come out tonight, and this is the big stretch for this core. This is what Doug Armstrong was talking about, and this core goes, you know,
It's been
he's
fun.
right. He's right. We're not that team. It's been fun. We'll just kind of go out there. We'll see what the tone's going to be, and the next thing you know, Colorado's up 3-0 in the first period.
Yeah, Doug Armstrong just handed this team more adversity and says, how are you going to handle it? Because the biggest thing Jim Montgomery has talked about this squad is you can't handle adversity. We're still trying to figure out how to handle these situations. Well, Doug Armstrong handed it to you. You traded away one player. You basically waived another and terminated his contract because he didn't want to go to the minor leagues. And as Robert Thomas told TMA this morning, we did that. Our performance did that. You could say it, but now you got to deal with adversity. And I don't disagree with you. I think this team has shown the inability to take their game to the next level. This is going to be the perfect moment for Doug Armstrong to observe, and I think he did that for a reason. I think with 5 games going into a Four Nations tournament, you know, look around the league. We talked yesterday about the Minnesota Wild, how their coach called out the players, and the players had a team meeting, and then they went out there to win 3 straight. Last night, Calgary made a trade. They made a trade to bring in 2 former first-round draft picks from the Philadelphia Flyers because their general manager told the media, these guys showed me that they deserved a little bit of reinforcements. And he went out there and made a trade for them. That's a team that only won 3 in a row twice since the month of January and lost to you in consecutive games. How do you handle this? Because this is going to be one of those defining moments, I think, from the front office to be able to sit up top and observe what they look like. Who handles adversity well? And if you can't, now you have to start having some real discussions. Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Alex Ferrario. Again, our Air Comfort Service text line, 314-399-9646. Also, you can get in on our YouTube chat, The Graveyard, which is up and running over on our YouTube channel at 101 ESPN STL. Our YouTube cameras brought to you by the Air Alliance team. We got Jordan Deacon back in our 101 ESPN studios. Former NHL goalie Mike McKenna is going to join us later on at 1:15. But coming up next, if the Cardinals aren't able to do anything this offseason, meaning any type of roster moves, and know that minor league signing yesterday doesn't count in my opinion, how does that make you feel about them going into this season? We'll get to that and the power side of things for the Cardinals next on 101 ESPN.
Broadcasting live from the Centene Community Ice Center inside the E&B Granite Studios. This is BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN. E&B Granite, Bernie Fedurko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring.
Yeah, I think priority 1, 2, and 3 is still Nolan.
So that was President of Baseball Operations John Mozeliak at winter warm-up a couple of weeks ago. Priority 1, 2, and 3, T-Bone, for moving Nolan Arenado. Well, priority 1, 2, and 3 looks very, very, very unlikely. If you missed it yesterday, we had the audio of John Morosi on MLB Network saying he's hearing that it is very, very, very likely that Nolan Arenado will be at Cardinals spring training once they open things up in Jupiter. With Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Alex Ferrario. So what if the Cardinals aren't able to do anything this offseason. What does that do for your expectations? I don't see any moves happening for this team. You can't move on from Nolan Arenado. John Mozeliak essentially said at winter warmup, like, look, we don't have to move money out. If we can't move Nolan Arenado, we're fine. But we're fine means we're not doing anything. We're standing pat. And he addressed how they would like to bring in a late inning reliever. They would like to bring in a power bat. I think he said a power bat from the right side, if I remember correctly.
Right-handed bat.
Off of the bench. All of those things aren't available to them if you can't move on from Nolan Arenado. Set aside the playing time and how important it is, because to me, the guys that are going to matter most for this Cardinals team are going to see the field. It's going to be Nolan Gorman. He's just going to become your everyday second baseman, or he's going to be an everyday DH for you. Brendan Donovan's going to play. Even if he's a super utility guy, he'll be in the lineup every single night. Lars Nootbaar is going to play. Jordan Walker is going to play. And frankly, Ivan Herrera, I hope, is going to play. Those are the guys that matter to me most. But if you can't do anything else with this team, as good as the playing time is going to be, I don't know if I look at this team and see any optimism. Like, yes, the NL Central is allowing you an opportunity, but you still have a lot of holes in terms of you're young in the rotation, which could be a good thing, could be a bad thing. Your bullpen has not gained any assets to help them. So you're really relying, once again, on Ryan Helsley to be the catalyst for them, because you don't have a Kittredge anymore. Jojo Romero's declined a little bit. You're bringing in a couple of players that had some upside last year, but you're giving them more runway. And then you were just mentioning a little bit ago, you don't have a lot of backup players in certain roles, like the shortstop position. Who's your backup shortstop? Because last year, they didn't like anybody other than Brandon Crawford. Is it Thomas Ajacey? As much as the optimism should be of, like, you're getting the playing time for those players, even if Nolan Arenado is here, you didn't do anything else to really support those players in terms of a long 162-game schedule.
Yeah, it's very disappointing if they can't do anything, because though I'm not a big believer in this roster. Like, I don't think they're going to win the division. I think we agree on this. They're kind of probably in third is where we would kind of see them coming into the season. But, like, we also know that they have a wide range of outcomes, right? The young kids could not hit, and they could be awful. Or the young kids could hit, and they could end up being a decent baseball team. But I would like to see them be able to bring in some reinforcements, mostly just to a bullpen. Bring in a bullpen arm to help you out, right? It's a lot to ask Ryan Fernandez to fill the role Andrew Kittredge had last year. Even though Fernandez was good, what you saw with Kittredge was, hey, this guy set the record, franchise record for holds. Yeah. Well, that's not an easy thing to replace for Fernandez, and he's only in year 2. Now there's a better scouting report on him across baseball. You mentioned JoJo. He kind of tailed off in the back end there. I mean, there was, a month there where he only had 2 appearances because he didn't have the grip for it. I think it was his changeup, if I remember correctly. And I don't know what you do with the backup shortstops, but my guess is you probably just go with Thomas Ajacey or Brendan Donovan. But if they aren't able to do anything because of Arenado's contract still being on the books, I don't know if a lot really changes for me. Because the only thing that I would say is it's disappointing, but it's mostly just because that's 600 plate appearances that are now locked in for Nolan Arenado and not guaranteeing for Nolan Gorman at third, Donovan at second. Now you can have Burleson be your DH while Herrera can be your catcher with Nootbaar in left. Now it's more disappointing just because of the logjam that there is on this roster. And that's my biggest fear with Arenado remaining on the roster is they're going to get stuck back into that kind of rotating door of, oh, okay, Gorman went 0 for 4 with 3 strikeouts. All right, well, maybe today's not his day, so Donovan's back in. No, these guys have to have runway this season. And it's getting a lot harder to do that with Nolan Arenado on the book still. And same for the rotation, by the way. Like, they've still got Fetty. They've still got Matz. And my expectation is they're going to have Matz start. Now, we both are on the same page of either A, trade him, or B, put him in the bullpen. But the way that they have talked, it sounds like Matz is a guy that's going to be a starter. And now you have to look at McGreevy and go, okay, well, what's McGreevy's role? Because I don't think it's best suited for him to be in the bullpen, to be a long reliever / swingman. Like, how often has that worked for the Cardinals? Ask Liberatore how his experience has been as a swingman. I would say he probably doesn't like it. So it's very disappointing what they have done. It hasn't really changed my expectations because I still think they are more of what they're Pythag was last season, where when he looked at them, we talked about it. They somehow finished above 500, but the Pythag had them at 76 and 86. I think that's who they are.
Yeah.
And now, I think if they added one arm to help their bullpen, maybe you add another win or two to that, just because it helps you stabilize that back end of the pen. But my expectations aren't changing because Arenado's here. It's just disappointing that they can't accomplish literally one thing that they set out to do this offseason, which is, hey, trade Arenado. Youth movement is full in. And now you look at it and you're going, okay, Arenado's here. Michaelis, Matz, Fetty are still here in the rotation. Where's this youth movement occurring at?
Yeah, well, and I think it's more frustrating on the pitching side than the position player side. And again, I understand you want to see Nolan Gorman at third base. He's going to be an everyday third baseman. That was the hope with this one. I think the frustration on the player side, and I hate to put all of this on him, but I think the frustration from the position player side is going to be on Ali Marmol. Like, it's going to come down to, do we get frustrated because Ali continues to, sit Nolan Gorman? He continues to play a Michael Ciani in the outfield over a Lars Nootbaar or something like that because Brendan Donovan has to play. Do they continue to put somebody at the DH that you don't want to see in that position? Does Pedro Pajes continue to get starts behind the plate because Ivan Herrera's defense doesn't match up? Like, if they do this correctly, and I know this is a tough thing to ask for Ali because obviously your job is dictated on wins and losses, but you're still going to get the playing time for those guys. It really comes down to one player who's probably not going to be consistently in the lineup, whether that's Brendan Donovan or Alec Burleson, and Nolan Gorman playing the second base position, or he's playing in the DH and Brendan Donovan's your second baseman. The pitching side is where it really gets frustrating because you're right. Sonny Gray, good. You got a top end.
Forgot about him.
You forgot about him. That's not a good thing. But you know what? You've got your horse, and that horse is going to start every fifth day for you, you would imagine, and be a top-level starter. Eric Fetty thing would have made a lot of sense if you got rid of him, but you know what? You need innings, and Miles Michaelis you're stuck with. But Matz, really? Like, 3 of the 5 in your rotation, or at least at the minimum, 2 of the 5 in the rotation should be some of these young arms. It should be McGreevy, Graceffo, if Quinn Matthews impresses. 2 of those 3 should be getting starts for you every fifth day.
Well.
Palante is in this one. So now we're only talking about one spot that's going to go to Steven Matz. How is that supposed to be the, hey, we're going to see what these guys got? Now, maybe McGreevy and Graceffo are coming out of your bullpen, and they're long arms that you're able to use. Still not going to make me happy if you've told us that this is a youth movement. We've got to see what we've got in our young arms. And what's going to be really frustrating is if those guys start in Memphis, because that does nothing for this team.
Yeah, it really does nothing for Graceffo, McGreevy, to your point, because they've been there, done it, and now they've even had a taste of big leagues and had success, right? I have no issue with Quinn Matthews starting in AAA. I think he still needs some seasoning. And I think I can't remember who it was that said it at winter warm-up. I think it was one of his teammates that was a pitcher. Might have been Lutos, actually. But somebody said, Matthews, he struggled when he got to AAA in 3 or 4 starts.
Which you'd expect.
And the person that was up there talking, it was McGreevy. McGreevy said, hey, look, I think he just ran out of gas. He won't admit it, but I think that's what happened. And that makes sense, right? Big league season. He's slowly continuing to build innings up as he goes along throughout his big league career. That all makes sense. I think a little more seasoning for him in AAA, I don't mind. But I'm with you. Like, you've got to get some answers on some of these guys. You've got to find out, okay, Palante, is he a guy that we can start and have him be a cost control arm that's going to be a number 3 for us? Hell, maybe even a number 2 if he pitches well enough. Because there's also a chance that last year was a flash in the pan, right? He doesn't get a lot of strikeouts. He improved last year when he went down to the minor leagues to work on getting right-handers out, but we'll see what adjustments righties make back to him. Same for McGreevy. Look, McGreevy was great last year. McGreevy's also a pitch-to-contact guy, right? So McGreevy's numbers are going to fluctuate. So it's a matter of finding out what he truly is. It's going to be very disappointing if this team goes into this season and we end up leaving it and going, okay, we still don't have answers on McGreevy. We still don't have answers on even a Sajacy, Burleson more. Was Burleson a one-hit wonder? What about Jordan Walker? They're trending towards potentially running into these problems because of Arenado being on the books.
One more, T-Bone, before we get to NFL quick hitters on the other side. You were talking about the Zips projection on Fangraphs and kind of looking at the way it was projecting out for the offense. And you said there were no players that were expected to hit 20 home runs?
They had one player for 20, and that was Nolan Gorman with 27.
And that...
Which, hell yeah.
Well, I don't buy that one.
What?
As much as we talk about this offense, and look, a lot of this is upside, the one thing that T-Bone loves, that everybody knows, is slug, baby, slug. I hate to break it to you, man, but I don't know if this team has any slug on its roster. Because the only other push player that I would put into that where I'm expecting 20-plus home runs is Wilson Contreras, and that comes down to health. Who else would you put in that say I'm expecting power from 20-plus home runs this season?
Well, we'll talk about this later on, but I think you get a peak Lars season. If Lars can stay healthy, I think Lars can get there. We'll see on Arenado. I'm skeptical on that one. But for me, it comes down to Nootbaar. I think Donovan's got sneaky power, but I don't know if he can get to 20. Does Herrera add more pop? But even for him, it would be a lot.
Yeah.
It comes down to Nootbaar, and it comes down to Walker. Probably.
Yeah.
It comes down to your corner outfield spots, which, again, shocker, here we are talking about the outfield once again. Because I'm with you. I think Contreras, the projections, they had him at 16.
Yeah.
That's just being dragged down because he hasn't been healthy. I think he can stay healthy at first base, or if he can't stay there because of his defense, you just slot him to DH. I think he's going to have a massive season. So I'm with you there. I don't know if Burley's getting to 20 just because I don't know where Burley's getting at bats.
Yeah.
So then it comes down to, okay, so is Nootbaar going to stay healthy? If he does, I think he's got the pop to get there. And can Walker start lifting the ball in the air? Because we've seen Jordan Walker, he can hit them a long way. He's got decent power once he gets that ball up in the air, but it's always been a problem for him. But I think those are the two guys. Now, I don't think there's enough power in this lineup. Now, granted, it's a retool, so they're not trying to well, they're claiming they're competing, but
what are you talking about, man? The NL Central's easy.
Yeah, but I don't know if they've still got a ton of power, and I don't know if there's a lot more coming. This is something another thing they got to figure out this season is, okay, what is the maximum for these guys? What can we put in pen for Jordan Walker home run-wise, Nootbaar wise? I'll even Mason Wynn. I think there's more power to his game as well. But on paper, no, they do not have a ton of power. This is not going to be a slug, baby, slug team.
And that is not an easy thing to sit there and say, hey, we're lacking power. Let's go out and find it. And guess what you pay a lot of money for, T-Bone, on the free agent market?
Power.
That's power. And we know how this team goes when it comes to spending money. He's Tanner Hendrickson. I'm Alex Ferrario. Coming up at 15, we'll get to Ask Us Anything. You send us any type of question you want us to get into to our Air Comfort Service text line, 314-399-9646. We'll answer those in 15. But coming up next, some NFL quick hitters here on 101 ESPN.
101 ESPN Sports Center.
I'm Jordan Deacon. The Sports Center update is driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. It's a busy weekend full of sports here on 101 ESPN, and tonight we're kicking it off with the Blues taking on the Colorado Avalanche. Pregame is at 7 and puck drop is at 8. Tomorrow, college basketball action starts with Tennessee versus Florida, pregame at 10:30. Then Duke is taking on North Carolina with pregame at 5:15. Finishing it up on Sunday, Pro Bowl action starts at 2 o'clock, and then the Blues are taking on the Utah Hockey Club with pregame at 6 and puck drop at 7. I'm Jordan Deacon. The Sports Center update was driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
This is BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN. We're broadcasting live from the E&B Granite Studios at the Centene Community Ice Center. E&B Granite, Bernie Fedurko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring.
Along with Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Alex Ferrario. We're here at the E&B Granite Studios at Centene Community Ice Center. The Blues out in Colorado. They take on the Avalanche later on tonight, as you heard in Jordan Deacon's Sports Center update. We'll get to Ask Us Anything coming up in our next segment. You could send us a question, 314-399-9646. We'll get to those in about 15 minutes or so. But let's get to some NFL quick hitters. And T-Bone, let's start with some contract projections, because it's that time of the year where the offseason rolls around. And Spot Track goes out and projects what some of these contracts are going to look like. Let's go quarterback edition, if you don't mind, T-Bone.
All right.
Everybody loves themselves some Sam Darnold, right? The big conversation, do the Minnesota Vikings bring back Sam Darnold? He got them to the playoffs, one of the best teams in the NFC. 4 years, $160 million. It would be a $40 million AAV projection for Sam Darnold. I think it would be the 14th highest paid quarterback in the National Football League, Sam Darnold. There's no bleeping way I'm doing that. Off of one season where I saw him perform well, but let's be honest about it. He also was performing with an incredibly smart head coach and one of the best, if not the best, wide receiver in the game today. And I'm going to give this guy $160 million for the next 4 years? No way.
Yeah, I'm with you. Darnold really killed himself in those final 2 games. You know, maybe I could have looked at that and said, okay, if I'm desperate for a quarterback, Darnold played well, even though the Vikings got bounced in the first round, maybe I could convince myself. And it's the classic thing I get told all the time with hockey, right? Oh, he's a former first-round pick.
Right.
So maybe he could convince himself of that, but I can't see anybody giving him that kind of contract now that he is had the 2 games that did just happen. What about this one? Because I saw this contract projection from ESPN. 3 years, $120 million, $75 million guaranteed, would tie for 15th among quarterbacks in AAV. In on that?
No. For who?
Darnold.
Oh, that's for Darnold? No, yeah. I'm not giving him more than, and I know you have to if you're a team that's desperate. I'm not giving him more than a 1-year deal. Like, how can I give that guy a multi-year deal off of 1 year where he performed well with Minnesota, but he choked in the final 2 games of their season, the biggest games of the year? And he wasn't injured. It wasn't like the team was dealing with massive injuries. That team was healthy and ready to go, and he choked in the final 2 games. Why would I give that player 3 or 4 years with $75 million guaranteed? I
tend to agree with you. I think somebody will give him close to that contract. Maybe it'd only be 2 years, and maybe 2 years. I'm not even going to try quick math, but I could see somebody biting at that. And the reason I think it's possible for him is because of the fact that, like, you look at the quarterback market, and there's a great piece on The Athletic today talking about it. Everybody's looking at this draft going, there's not a franchise caliber quarterback here. We don't know. So if there's not a franchise caliber quarterback here, we don't have a quarterback, and we've got to go out to the veteran market. My choices are essentially Sam Darnold, Russell Wilson, Jameis Winston, and a couple of other names like that have been journeyman quarterbacks. Man, I can convince myself, you know what? I don't know if I believe in Sam Darnold, but if I can get like 90% of what he gave Minnesota, it will be worth it for us because it will just provide stability for us at our quarterback spot.
Let me do one more quarterback. I'm going to just give you the number, You tell me if you would do it or not, okay? 2 years, $50 million, $35 million guaranteed. It was a starting quarterback this past season in the NFL. And you tell me if you would do it if you need a quarterback, and I'll tell you the guy's name.
Well, it's hard to do that not knowing the name, but a 2-year contract's not bad for a quarterback.
$35 million guaranteed.
Yeah, not bad.
Russell Wilson.
I'd do that.
Yeah.
I would do a 2-year deal with
I'd do that before I do Sam Darnold.
I agree. I think there's probably more upside for Darnold than there is Wilson. But I think at least with Russ, there's some stability.
Yeah.
And it's only 2 years, which isn't too bad. I think like that kind of deal makes a ton of sense for the Raiders.
I agree.
Reconnect with Pete Carroll now. That team still stinks, but he at least gives you some certainty at the quarterback spot. I would do a 2-year deal for Russ.
I would do Russ.
I could convince myself of that one.
Okay, one more quarterback, and then we'll get to a couple of others here on our NFL Quick Hitters. A contract extension for Brock Purdy. Prediction, 4 years, $196 million, $112 million would be guaranteed. He'd be the 10th highest paid quarterback in terms of AAV.
I'm curious your thoughts, because I know what I would do. I wonder if we're on the same page.
I hate it, but I think you have to.
That's kind of where I am.
I hate it because I don't think Brock Purdy's the guy that can win you a Super Bowl. And, I mean, he's gotten them to multiple Super Bowls, so it's hard for me to say that. But I feel like that was an incredible roster with Kyle Shanahan as the coach. And we saw the demise of him this year. When you're not a well-oiled machine, things can fall apart pretty quick. But 4 years, $112 million guaranteed for a game manager in Brock Purdy, man, after seeing what Sam Darnold could potentially get on the market and then seeing what else is out there, I think this is the best case scenario for the 49ers to at least try and keep themselves relevant for the next few years.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you. Like, I don't know that I really like this deal for Brock Purdy, but it's not like one that moves him up to the top. Now, that's where I think this will get interesting, because I can see where Purdy looks at this and says what you mentioned, right? Hey, I've been to multiple Super Bowls, right? I've gotten you to a Super Bowl. We didn't win it, but I got us there. We lost to Mahomes, for crying out loud, the best quarterback going in the NFL. I should be top 5 or resetting the market. I could see where Purdy tries to convince himself of that, but look, he's had the elbow issues, which is alarming. He's probably not a top 10 quarterback, but we know how these contracts work, and I kind of agree. There's not a lot of better options out there, right? There's no like, oh, this quarterback's on the trade market, so we should go out and get him. No, I think you stick with Brock Purdy. I would do that contract knowing that there's a decent chance that it could come back to bite me.
The Cincinnati Bengals are in for a world of hurt this offseason because the projections for their 2 wide receivers, T. Higgins, who, if I'm not mistaken, he's got 1 year left, which is a franchise, or they have the opportunity for 1 year with the franchise tag.
I believe that's right with Higgins, yeah.
The prediction for him, for T. Higgins, is 4 years, $114 million, $70 million guaranteed. And then the projections for the extension for Jamar Chase would be 5 years, $180 million, $70 million guaranteed. They're going to have to choose one. I know Joe Burrow said that both are going to be back, and they're hopeful. Maybe you get one more year out of it, but you're not keeping both of these guys for the long term. You got to pick one.
Yeah, I don't know how you could keep both of them because they're going to eat so much of your cap space up. And look at their defense this year. Yeah. Like, the offense was fun. Burrow was a MVP catalyst this year. He was unbelievable. Their offense was great. They couldn't stop anybody, and you're not going to be able to outscore your problems on defense. So, yeah, I agree. You can't keep both of those guys. You're going to have to choose one. My guess, they're going to choose Chase, lock him up, and then you let T. Higgins walk. And that sucks because, yeah, this offense was great, and you may not ever get another T. Higgins type that comes in and is kind of that Robin to your Batman. But you've got to go upgrade your defense because even without T. Higgins, you could make some noise in the playoffs. Joe Burrow is that clutch when he gets to playoff time, but you got to have a defense that can get stops to support him.
Yeah, you have to use your money in other areas that you were bad in. And last year, your defense was awful. It's the reason that you could not make it to the playoffs. You had a great offense, Joe Burrow, in the conversation for MVP. And, yeah, you take a step back without T. Higgins. But you're talking about $70 million guaranteed, $114 million that you can apply towards your roster over the next 4 years. Make your team great in other areas, and then let Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase go off. We've seen plenty of teams win with a quarterback wide receiver duo, but you got to spend money in other areas to benefit your team. So it's the smart move, and frankly, from Cincinnati, I know you're really going to be bribed, not bribed, I'm trying to think of the right word, but basically you're going to want to keep him for one more year. You're going to say, like, let's run it back one more year. And I think that's going to cause a lot of drama because of the uncertainty of the future with contracts for both of them. I think you might need to trade him at the draft if you're Cincinnati. Get it done now, rip that Band-Aid off, and then start applying the money to the team that you need elsewhere.
Yeah, tag him and trade him. Is that what Tennessee did with A.J.
Brown? I don't remember. Did they tag him?
Tagged or not? He may have had one more year before he hit free agency, but I mean, it would make a ton of sense to go that route.
Yeah. Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Alex Ferrario. We'll get to Ask Us Anything next. You send us a question to our Air Comfort Service text line, 314-399-9646. Ask Us Anything next on 101 ESPN.
Live from the Centene Community Ice Center inside the ENB Granite Studios, this is BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN. ENB Granite, Bernie Federko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring. You've got questions, we may have the answers. Maybe. It's BK and Ferrario's Questions and Answers on on 101 ESPN.
314-399-9646, our Air Comfort Service text line. You can also get in on the YouTube conversation, our YouTube chat. We like to call the graveyard over at 101 ESPN STL, alongside Tanner Hendricks and Jordan Deacon back in our studios. I'm Alex Ferrario. From the 801, the NHL released the new cap projections this morning. What's the realistic number that the Blues are looking at next year, and who could they bring in during free agency? So if you missed it, Elliot Friedman put it out earlier today. The cap is projected to go up to $95.5 million next year, which, according to Puckpedia, and JR had this in his article yesterday, with Brandon Saad. Now, when you go to Puckpedia and you look at it, it says $6.7 million. That's because Saad has not come off of the books yet. When his contract's officially terminated, he'll come off the books. According to that, you'll have $10.7 million next season. Now, that changes also if Torrey Krug is still on LTIR. That LTIR, your cap would still be 10.7, but with the LTIR money, you're looking at about $17 million in cap space. And next season, you've got 12 forwards, 6 defensemen, 1 goaltender, all under contract. And then you've got Matt Kessel in the AHL, and then you'll have Dvorsky and Snuggerud. So you've got 14 forwards, 7 defensemen, and 1 goaltender. My expectations is Joel Hofer, Tyler Tucker get re-signed, probably around $3 million total. That does give you, with the LTIR space, $14 million in cap space. Without it, $7 million in cap space. I got to be honest, T-Bone, to answer the question, I don't know if I would just go out there willy-nilly and start spending it on free agents. There's a couple of guys out there that would be interesting, but honestly, I don't know if it makes sense for the Blues. Does Mikko Rantanen make sense for St. Louis? Like, obviously, you'd love a 50-goal scorer, but for $14 million?
In.
He's 29 years old,
Don't
too.
care. He's the best player on your team when brought in.
Oh, totally agree with that. The other one is... God, who was the other free agent that I told you?
Marner.
Oh, yeah, Marner. And I don't know if Marner's going to be even a free agent. Toronto might lock him up now with the cap going up. Those are the guys. So, yeah, you could go after both of them. I think if I'm the Blues and I'm going to utilize my money, it's either in another offer sheet situation, which I don't think you have the draft picks for anymore, or it's a trade. I'm going to go trade for somebody who's got salary on his books. So I send somebody out, bring somebody in, and that's my cap hit.
Yeah, I mean, if you could get Rantanen or Marner here, yeah, I'm 100% in. I don't know if they'd want to come here. I don't even worry about you mentioned the $14 million cap hit. I don't care. I'll figure it out. You know, that's a guy you bring into the lineup, you put in pen, 50 goals. You don't have a dynamic playmaker like that. And now you've got your top line figured out, right? Booch, Thomas, Rantanen, no questions about that core. Well, yeah. Maybe, but it would be a hell of a line, and you wouldn't have the issue you're running into right now, which is Texier's with Thomas. Like,
hey, it's going to work.
Yeah, call me skeptical, but I kind of agree. I'll be curious to know, especially coming off of this year, right, where we kind of assumed this offseason, okay, Blues, they're probably not going to go to the cap. They're going into this, they're in this retool. Still a little bit of this youth movement. We'd be shocked if they end up spending to the cap. Not only did they spend to the cap, they technically have spent over the cap with Krug being on LTIR. So the fact that ownership gave Army that much leeway makes me wonder, okay, if they go over as much as they did this year and miss the playoffs, is Army going to have that same leeway when the cap goes up? I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. Tom Stillman values winning. So I could see where if Doug Armstrong sees something that he really likes, where Tom Stillman gives him the green light and says, yeah, let's be a cap team again. We want to get back to the playoffs. Let's go be a cap team. I could totally see where they end up spending up to that cap space next year.
Yeah, I'm gonna look through this and just kind of see where that ranks over the next 3 years, because there's a lot of teams that have a lot more cap space, and then obviously you get into a bidding war with those free agents, which is why I think the trade is going to be the route to go. From the 314, do you guys think that the 2025 Cardinals season could be historically bad like the 1990 year was when Whitey Herzog quit? They finished 70-92.
I think there's a chance that could happen. I wouldn't bet on that, but I think there is a chance because, look, we've seen the floor of Jordan Walker. He's not a major leaguer. I mean, you saw that last year. He wasn't a major leaguer. Same with Nolan Gorman. Two too many holes in his swing. If Alec Burleson is like who he was in the second half, Alec Burleson was below league average in the second half, I think by like 20%, if I remember correctly. So, yeah, there's a chance that you look at this team and the bullpen ends up kind of regressing because bullpens are always a fickle thing. Ryan Helsley gets traded at the deadline. The offensive from the young kids, they don't end up taking that step. Mason Wynn takes a step back, say. And then your pitching ends up just being okay, bad. Maybe McGreevy ends up having a bad year. Palante gets hit around. Yeah, it's definitely in the range of outcomes that they could be that bad.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, this team is going to figure out. I mean, we're seeing it right now with the Blues trying to figure out how to handle adversity. And these are guys that have been in the league for a long time. You're about to see it with guys who have not been in the league that long. And they're going to be, you're the faces of the franchise. You're the team that's now guiding them through this retool, refresh. I do think there is a realistic possibility that they're drafting top 5 once again in Major League Baseball draft, having a bad year. 70s is pretty extreme. I could see 75, something like that.
I know where I think.
I don't know if 70's bad. Like 70's, oof. You're pushing 100 losses there.
Yeah.
I think you could probably be about 75, though. Somewhere around there, somewhere around a 500 record once again.
Yeah, I think they're a 70-75 win team, somewhere in that range.
From the 314, I know the answer, but wouldn't Luis Robert make sense for the Cardinals? We have too many average parts. We need possible studs. For those that may have missed it, Ken Rosenthal reported yesterday, we didn't get to it yesterday, that the Cincinnati Reds were nearing a trade to completion with the Chicago White Sox for Luis Robert. I think there was a couple of top prospects in the Red system that was involved with it.
You want to talk about two broken goods that were being potentially swapped. One of the top prospects that the Reds had in that deal was coming off offseason labrum surgery. So that goes to show you the broken part of Luis Robert and the prospect that were involved in that kind of trade.
Yeah. From the 972, what kind of package would get Elias Pettersson to St. Louis? Would it have to be Kyrou or could Booch get it done? From what Harmondale said yesterday in terms of what Vancouver could be looking for, and he was talking about both of them because both are centermen, he said, look, Vancouver is not going to be trading these players to get prospects or picks back. They're trading it for a guy who helps them now because as soon as you trade one of those guys, Quinn Hughes is going to start wondering if I want to be in Vancouver, and you could be losing the three-headed monster that you have pretty quickly. I think if you're even engaging the conversation with them, it's going to have to be one of Thomas Kyrou or Buchnevich. Thomas, it's probably not going to be as much that you have to add to it. Kyrou, you're probably having to add a little bit. Buch, you're probably going to have to a little bit more. I think there's a tier. We had Wyshynski on a couple of days ago, T-Bone, and he said, yeah, Robert Thomas is viewed as a star in the National Hockey League. If you're putting him up for a trade, anybody's going to listen. So I'm very skeptical of doing that, but I think the only way you get it done is with one of those three.
Yeah, I think it has to be one of Kyrou or Thomas. I think right now Booch is a distressed asset to where I don't think Vancouver would want him. And I get it. He doesn't have any trade protection, and he's going to make $8 million next year. I mean, we're talking about Buchnevich being a bad contract extension already, so why would the Canucks want that, right? Kyrou, we're not having that conversation about. Thomas, we're not having that conversation about. I think it would have to be one of those two to be the centerpiece if you wanted to go make that move.
Yeah, let's wrap up with this one from the 618. Alex, you just went through what the free agency looks like and said they're in good shape. Don't they have to re-sign Dylan Holloway and Philip Broberg? So those two guys are under contract next year. And then they're RFAs to where the Blues have all of their rights, but their new contract wouldn't kick in until the 2026-2027 season. And at that time, the cap hit the projected cap space for the Blues is sitting at $50 million. So they're not going to have a problem getting those two guys locked up. That's going to be priority number one for the team, and then you can address the state of your team beyond that. Speaking of the Blues, JR had a piece earlier today on The Athletic talking about what could be next for the Blues in terms of they've already moved on from Perunovich, they've moved on from Saad. If things continue to go south, who else could the Blues move on from? Do they have untouchables on this team? T-Bone and I will discuss next on 101 ESPN.
BK and Ferrario are broadcasting live from the E&B Granite Studios at the Centene Community Ice Center on 101 ESPN. E&B Granite, Bernie Fedorko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring.
Along with Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Alex Ferrario, Jordan Deacon back in our 101 ESPN studios. We are here at the E&B Granite Studios at Centene Community Ice Center, and Jeremy Rutherford of The Athletic, our Blues insider who joins us weekly on Tuesdays here on BK and Ferrario. He had a new piece out earlier today, and it was talking about the Blues trade tiers. After the Brandon Saad trade and the Scott Perunovich trade, those were guys that the Blues could move on from. I don't know if they expected to be able to get out of the $4.5 million next year when they sent them through waivers, but regardless, those are guys that the Blues said we can get out of these contracts easily. There's a couple of guys on this trade tier list that JR mentioned that, you know what, if you get to that point, you can move on from them. Ryan Suter, Radek Faksa. There was another unrestricted free agent that I think they had on that list. But regardless, he put together a tier list of where players are at. And he started with untouchables. And this is who JR had on his untouchables list. Robert Thomas, Colton Parayko, Dylan Holloway, Philip Broberg. And JR labeled it as untouchable, ... I think. And the reason he put I think is because, let's be honest, for the right deal, you could probably trade anybody on this team right now for the struggles that they've gone to. Do you agree with those four untouchables, T-Bone? Robert Thomas, Dylan Holloway, Philip Broberg, Colton Parayko.
So here's what's interesting. I do agree. I think those are the four for me. Like, if I had to have untouchables, it's those four guys. I would throw one more in here, and this is where it gets to where I almost lead myself into the ... I think, is I would put Kyrou in that mix. I think Kyrou's been really good this season. And I know he's not been a point-per-game guy. He's been super close, so he's been really good under Montgomery. Him and Holloway and Shen have been your best line under Jim Montgomery. I mean, Dylan Holloway's averaging a point per game since Montgomery took over this season.
Right.
So I would throw Kyrou into that conversation, but the reason that it then leads me into that ... I think is, okay, well, if you do need a major core shakeup, then where am I doing it from if that's the list, right?
Uh-huh.
And that's where you maybe say, okay, well, then maybe that's Pavel Buchnevich because I didn't say him there. Maybe that is the case. But I do like the way that JR framed that because I think those 4, 5, if you include Kyrou, who I would throw in there, I think they are untouchables. But I do think you are getting close, and we talked about this earlier. I think you are getting close to where potentially at the end of this season, you have to look at the core and say, it's time for a shakeup. I know you guys talked with Backus yesterday. We've brought up that team a couple times, right, where they end up trading away T.J. Oshie to go get Troy Brouwer in that deal. Like, I can see where they're getting close to it, but for me right now at the trade deadline, I would say Thomas, Parayko, Holloway, Broberg, Kyrou. To me, all untouchable.
So here's why I wouldn't put Kyrou in that list, and I would have Kyrou in the grouping that JR said was next, is does it help to move them? And in that group, it was Kyrou, Pavel Buchnevich, Braden Shen, Jake Neighbors, Jordan Binnington, Joel Hofer. I wouldn't put Kyrou in the untouchables because he's not a centerman. And I know that seems odd to say, but Jordan Kyrou has yet to be a 40-goal scorer in the National Hockey League. Jordan Kyrou has yet to be a point-per-game player in the National Hockey League. He's not a power play threat for you right now. All he is he's a 30-goal scorer. And I know that's like, all he is a 30-goal scorer. That's great. Totally. And you need those guys to win. But he's not untouchable because I know what Robert Thomas is when he's at his best. And I know we're down on him because January is rough. But Robert Thomas is a number one center. And you do not find those guys very often. You can find guys who can score 30, 35 goals for you at some point. I'm not sitting here saying you need to trade Jordan Kyrou. He's a problem. Frankly, I wouldn't. But if I'm going to put Pavel Buchnevich in this list, because we're talking about if a major shakeup happens, is this guy untouchable? To me, if a major shakeup needs to happen, I'm still not trading Robert Thomas because I cannot find another number one center that can do what Robert Thomas does. If I need a major shakeup, I can trade one of my wingers who has not lived up to the expectations I had for them, even though Kyrou has been awesome this year. And I'm just lumping him into the core players that we've talked about that Doug Armstrong represented on Tuesday. If I'm going to make a major shakeup, I can't make my team worse by getting rid of a superstar. I can try and make a linear move to trade a goal-scoring winger for somebody else who fits that criteria.
All right, I'm going to ask a very unpopular question.
Okay.
And hear me out. Can you be a number one centerman if you're more just a points per game guy than defensive minded? And the reason I asked that question is, and I think it was JR that said in the piece, great two-way forward. I mean, I've only seen Robert Thomas be a great two-way centerman at the top for 1 year. Yep. I don't think he's been good defensively this year. That first year when he kind of took over that role for Ryan O'Reilly. Now, then he was learning on the job, but he wasn't very good, in my opinion, then defensively. He's really had just the one season, and that was last year, where it was a point-per-game guy while also being a really good shutdown centerman. I can't say that this year. I don't think he's been a great shutdown centerman. I mean, the Blues have told you that with their actions, right? Shen is the one that goes over the boards for the toughest matchups right now with Kyrou and Holloway. So can you be that guy that you're talking about if you're not the lockdown centerman as well? And that's why I'm leaning a little bit more towards I get what you're saying. There is a price to where I could totally take that answer and say, you know what? Yeah, we have to make this trade.
You're absolutely. I mean, it's a very fair question. And the year prior, so 2 years ago, he took over being the number one guy. And I expected some growing pains in that front. And frankly, last year was the best that I have seen from Robert Thomas. He got Selke Trophy votes. He was a point-per-game player. And he was one of the best centermen in terms of even strength goal differential in the National Hockey League. So last year was like oh, shoot, this is him. But you can't fall into the trap of, okay, but it was 1 year. What did you do to follow it up? And this year has been a little bit of a disappointment. Here's the thing, though. We did see it in the month of December from Robert Thomas. We're looking at January right now, and it's weird because you're segmenting what this season has been, and it's why it's so hard to evaluate this year. The first year, Robert Thomas was playing with Alex Texier and Brandon Saad and Jordan Kyrou and Dylan Holloway. And although those all sound great, it was never consistent because remember, in the middle of the games, you'd see Buchnevich and Kyrou back with him, but then it would be Buch back to the center spot. So there was no consistency, and he wasn't great in October. November, he gets injured. December, he was one of the 3 best players in the National Hockey League if you're going off of plus-minus. And why I'm using that as a stat to reference here is because he had 19 points in 14 games and still was a plus 13. And for those that don't know what plus-minus does, you get a minus when you're on the ice for a goal against. He was averaging 21 minutes a night, and he was scoring points per game, and then also it was a net positive on the ice. Not on the ice for goals against, on the ice for goals for. That was the Robert Thomas I remember. And then, of course, January takes place. So I don't know. If you end this season the rest of this way like this, I think you can legitimately have that question and say, did we just see a flash in the pan of Robert Thomas, or is it something that we can buy into? Because I can make the same argument for Jordan Kyrou. This was an awesome year by him. But was it the same? Do I see the same thing next year, or was this just a one-year thing? Pavel Buchnevich, we were living off of that first year where he was 35 goals and 70 points. Never have seen that since.
And that's why I've come skeptical of the Thomas defense, because I agree he was good prior to this month or this stretch. But even then, I felt like he still wasn't as good as he was last year, right? And maybe I'm wrong on that. Maybe it's the old eye test fails me, but I'm kind of with BK. I think his defense gets maybe a little overstated as to how good it is. But the thing that worries me about it is the same that you mentioned with Pavel Buchnevich, right? I never wanted to give Buch the contract extension.
I was kind of with you.
I was all in on trade. I think we were in this studio.
Yeah, I was just very skeptical of what it was going to look like long term.
And he hadn't really gone back and relived up to that first year, right? And that's where I was skeptical. The reason that I buy more into what Kyrou is doing is it's kind of been a linear what's the word I'm looking for?
Yeah, it's been projections, or improvement.
It's you have that year where he scores plenty of goals, but he ends up being a huge minus on the season.
Right.
And then last year he kind of cuts into that. He still ends up playing really well. Scores 31 goals. He's still minus 12. And then you look at it this year and you're going 42 points in 51 games. He's got 21 goals already, and he's a plus 11 right now. And just by watching him play, you can tell he's better defensively. He's more involved. Now, clearly Montgomery thinks the whole team needs this as a thing, but he probably could be better at board battles. but he's never going to have that as a strength, right? He's never going to go in and win a board battle for the Blues, but he's better defensively. I'd say he's probably average, which is where we wanted him to get to, and he's still producing for you on the ice. So I continue to see his growth. Meanwhile, and it's just been a couple of games, and maybe you're right by the end of the season, I look at Robert Thomas and I go, this has been weird. It's been a kind of a weird roller coaster defensively with him. For Buchnevich, it's really been some ups and downs.
Yeah.
Kyrie's the only guy I can't say that about, and once again, that's why I have him as the untouchable.
From the 3-1-4, and this is a really good point, the problem with all of this is we keep having the same conversations year after year on both Thomas and Kyrou, and I would throw Pavel Buchnevich into that as well. And that is the issue, and I think that's where Doug Armstrong and company are at right now. Let me get to a couple more of these and just see if you agree with these. So in that conversation, JR labeled it as, does it help to move them? Question mark. Meaning, are you going to trade them? Does that really make your team better? He had Kyrou, Pavel Buchnevich, Braden Chen, Jake Neighbors, Jordan Bennington, Joel Hofer. To me, I would put Jordan Bennington in the untouchable conversation, and I know people hate to hear it. He's having a bad year, but you're not going to get anything worth the return, and I think we all can agree after the season Joel Hofer has had, it's not anything that gets you excited that he's going to be a number one guy. But then the next one, part of the future, but in the right deal. Zach Bolduc, Toropchenko, Tyler Tucker. And then it comes to it would make sense. Justin Falk, Ryan Suter, and then the category worth more than the return. Cam Fowler, Radek Faksa, and then won't move the needle. Alex Texier, Matthew Joseph, Nathan Walker, Sundqvist, not an option, Nick Leddy, and Torrey Krug. And I agree with all of those. Torrey Krug and Nick Leddy, I know people are saying, like, why not try and move them? You're not getting anything. Nobody's going to take that right now because they've both been injured. At the end of the season, maybe you can reassess the Nick Leddy situation. But, T-Bone, I know there was one that stood out to you in those categories that you were kind of curious about.
Yeah, that is Cam Fowler. You know, the way that Cam Fowler's played here with the St. Louis Blues, I think there's a legitimate argument to be had to, hey, could we flip him at the trade deadline? You know, they gave up a second-round pick to acquire him and bring him in to be a part of their top four. I think there's, and then when you were talking to me off air before the show, you know, if you do make this move, it's a little tough to figure out what your top four is going to be. But you could potentially recoup that second-round pick right back if you were to flip Cam Fowler at the trade deadline. He's been great since he's been here with St. Louis. But if you're going to have a fire, I don't know if you can call it a fire sale, a bargain bin sale, is what I would call it. But, I mean, Fowler would be probably your best trade chip, right? I mean, Suter would be good, but he's pending UFA and he's 40. Radek Fox is a third, fourth-line center. Same with Sundqvist. I mean, he's a scratch right now. Sonny's an extra forward if you were to move him. Like, Fowler would probably be your best trade chip right now if you were the St. Louis Blues.
I don't disagree with you at all, but I think where JR is coming at, and this is where I fall into, the return you're going to get for him is maybe a third-round draft pick, maybe a second-round draft pick, but you had to trade a second-round draft pick just to get him from the Anaheim Ducks, but you also got a fourth-round pick in return. So really the wash is it's like a third-round draft pick. I don't know. Not that I don't know. A third-round draft pick for this draft or a future draft doesn't help you next year. They're going to view next year as an opportunity to be a playoff team. Once again, I imagine there's going to be some shifts to this roster in the offseason. If you get rid of Cam Fowler, your top four next year is Falk, Parayko, Broberg, and who? If Nick Leddy's still here, Nick Leddy. But that's what we had at the beginning of the season, and it didn't seem like we were very comfortable with that. And then, of course, they had to go get Cam Fowler. I don't think a draft pick helps you with moving Cam Fowler. I think Cam Fowler makes your team better next season. So I kind of fall in the same line of thinking with JR. Yes, you probably could explore the market and see what's out there, but I think when you've got Cam Fowler, who has played as one of your best defensemen since he was acquired, I think I'm better off keeping that guy in my top four for next season rather than try and trade him and bring something else back. Some of the other defensemen, that's where you can kind of fall in and say, hey, can we get something for Justin Falk if he's willing to go? Can we get something for Nick Leddy? Because you've got a Matt Kessel, a Tyler Tucker, and a couple of other guys in the pipeline. I don't know if you've got anybody that next year projects to be a top four defenseman like a Cam Fowler, Philip Broberg, and Colton Parayko do. With Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Alex Ferrario. We'll get back into the Blues in about 15 minutes because Alex Texier is getting a massive opportunity tonight playing on that top line. And where does Nick Leddy fall when he comes back into the lineup? But coming up next, we've talked a lot about what peak Lars looks like for the Cardinals. Let's expect a peak Lars season. What's that going to look like for this team? We'll get to that and Mason Wynn next on 101 ESPN.
Live from the Centene Community Ice Center inside the E&B Granite Studios, this is BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN. E&B Granite, Bernie Fedurko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring.
We're back here with BK and Ferrario live at the E&B Granite Studios at Centene Community Ice Center, along with Tanner Hendrickson. I'm Alex Ferrario, Jordan Deacon back in our 101 ESPN studios. So we talk a lot about Lars Nootbaar, and I think the reason why is because there has been a lot of excitement and anticipation for Lars Nootbaar. Of course, this was a guy that the Cardinals has deemed one of the core pieces for their team. He's an outfielder that has shown the ability to be an impact bat in your lineup and an impact player in your lineup. But we've heard a lot of peak Lars. That's been kind of a saying that we've put here on BK and Ferrario. And the reason why was his former hitting coach, who now I believe is a hitting coordinator for the Boston Red Sox, John Soteropoulos. And I found the audio, T-Bone, of when he was on with us, I think it was either last year or 2 years ago, when we were talking with Lars, who was playing really well, and we said, what does peak Lars look like? This was his answer.
Peak Lars Nootbaar? Okay, we have a mark it down right now. What's today? August 8th? 360 on base percentage, 500 slug. Mark it down right now.
The closest we've had to that, T-Bone, was last year. He was 367 on base percentage and a 418 slug with an OPS plus of 114. Surprisingly, that wasn't even his best year with the Cardinals. I guess the year prior was close to it as well, but he had a 340 on base percentage and a 448 slug. And that was an OPS plus of 124. 24% above league average, essentially. But that was also in 108 games played. He missed 54 games that season. We know what peak Lars looks like. The question is, can you stay healthy? But let's go down the path that he does, T-Bone. If we get peak Lars this season, what does this team look like?
I think if the Cardinals get peak Lars, it gives them a perfect number 2 hitter for their order, I think is where I would put him, because he gets on base at a high clip. I mean, you look at him, he's always going to draw walks, and he can hit for power. And if you get that from peak Lars, boom, now you've got your answer in left field with him. And then you've got him setting the table for Wilson Contreras, whoever ends up becoming your cleanup hitter this season. And depending on what you want to do a leadoff, you got Mason Wynn that could get on in front of him. Or if you wanted to, Ollie would never, but if you wanted to have Donovan, another lefty up, that gets on base as well. I think it really helps deepen this lineup to where he becomes a multi-factor threat, right? He's able to get on base. He can potentially steal a couple of bags. We've seen that before from him. And he can also hit for some power, which is something that we talked about earlier. This lineup is really going to need. They don't really have a mark and pen 30 home run guy. So I think if you can get a peak Lars Nootbaar season, now you're looking at this lineup going, okay, 1 through 4 or 1 through 3, we've got some answers. What do we get out of Arenado if he's here, or what is Gorman or Walker, or who becomes the cleanup hitter? But I think if you get a peak Lars Nootbaar season, you can at least look at your lineup and go, okay, we've got 1 through 3 figured out. Now we got to figure out the rest.
Yeah, so I'm trying to find just some comparisons for what that looks like. But the ZiPS projection for Lars Nootbaar for this upcoming season.
At 80th percentile.
80th percentile outcome, 270 batting average, 369 on base percentage, a 493 slug, and a 137 OPS plus. Just go back for the Cardinals this past year, and like the closest thing that the Cardinals had to a 134 OPS plus was Wilson Contreras. So if you're telling me that I'm getting 2 Wilson Contrerases in my lineup, well, now this refresh is starting to smell like 2 cans of Febreze in a bathroom. Because now I found another piece that is a middle-of-the-order bat that is a consistent threat every single game. And for what the Cardinals are telling us, Jordan Walker is supposed to be somebody like this. Nolan Gorman is supposed to be a 40 home run hitter. it's wild to where it feels like a lot of Cardinals fans are going to point to Jordan Walker and a Nolan Gorman and say these two guys are going to unlock what the potential is for the Cardinals. But is it outlandish to say that Lars Nootbaar might be the guy that could unlock what the potential is for the Cardinals moving forward?
I don't think it's outlandish, but I think where it comes down to is you need, two of those guys to be there? I don't think it can just be Nootbaar.
Can it be Nootbaar and Wilson Contreras, though?
So I wouldn't put Contreras in this because I think you can put – I say you can't put anybody in pen for 30 home runs. Contreras, if he's healthy, I think you could say he gets there. But I think you know what Contreras is, right? You know Contreras is going to be a guy that's going to hit like 260. He's going to slug 460, and he's going to be a guy that's going to be like 20+% above league average.
Yeah.
I think you know what he is. I think you need 3 guys in your order that are – I don't know if mashers is the right word, especially for this team, but you just need 3 dudes in the order. Like when you think back to the most recent Cardinals teams that were in the playoffs, think to that 2021 team. They had Paul Goldschmidt, Nolan Arenado, Tyler O'Neill, who was having an MVP caliber season. That's 3 dudes. You think back to 2022 when they made the playoffs. Goldschmidt, Arenado, Pujols, 3 studs. Now you look at them and you go, okay, well, who's the guys that are with Contreras? I think Nootbaar can be one of them. Mm-hmm. And then you need one of those other guys to step up, whether it be a Gorman, a Walker, Herrera. Somebody's going to have to move into a role to where, hey, you can be a guy that hits in the middle of this order, and I don't think it can be Arenado. And it's not just because, A, we kind of have an idea of what he is,
right,
but B, the fact of the matter that Arenado's clearly on the decline. So he can no longer be a guy that you look at and say, hey, that's our cleanup hitter. He's probably 5 or 6 for the St. Louis Cardinals, like he was at the back half. So, yes, I do think it's not outlandish to say Nootbaar can be a guy that helps them get over the hump and gets through this refresh quicker, but I don't think it can just be him. If Nootbaar's the only guy we leave this season going, yeah, that guy hit, everybody else did not, then we're going to be in for a long year.
You're in for a worse situation because now you have to go out there and find another Jordan Walker or a Nolan Gorman. Here's the other player, T-Bone, that is not going to fall into that same conversation, but it's Mason Wynn. I don't know if people saw this last night, but they're unveiling the top 100 players in baseball right now. And Mason Wynn fell, I believe he was in at number 96, if I remember correctly. It was either 96 or 91. Regardless of where he was, Mason Wynn being in a top 100 players in baseball conversation, that's impactful. I know he's not the same type of player as what Jordan Walker can become. He's not a 40 home run hitter in terms of Nolan Gorman or even a 137 OPS plus like a Lars Nootbaar. I think Mason Wynn is going to be a Gold Glove shortstop who's floating around 7 to 10% above league average in terms of OPS plus. But to have a top 100 player like him without any of these other guys that we're talking about falling into the top 100 player conversation, that moves the needle a little bit more, at least for me. I'm not sure how it is for Cardinals fans because defense isn't as sexy right now as offense, and if your team's struggling, you don't really care. But Mason Wynn being on that conversation, you hope that by next year we're talking about 3 or 4 more guys.
Yeah, and we've only seen 80 through 100. He came in at 94.
94, okay.
But, it goes to show you he was right behind Dansby Swanson. And I think at the time when the top 10 shortstop list came out, I feel like we talked about, hey, could he be what Dansby Swanson
And I think we argued that he was already better than Dansby Swanson.
So it's good to see he's getting some credit from MLB Network. But, yeah, I think the Cardinals are going to end up with 4 guys in the top 100 because it'll be him, Arenado, who's in there, Contreras, and then Sonny Gray.
Sonny Gray will be up there.
I think you're right. The hope is that when we get to this point next season, we're sitting here talking and saying at least 2 more guys have joined them in the top 100. Maybe not even top 10 at their position because, shortstop, clearly.
Yeah.
Mason Wynn is getting the respect he deserves in baseball, but shortstop's so deep it's hard for him to even crack a top 10 list. I think your hope for the Cardinals is whether it doesn't even have to be a position player side, right? Maybe Palante comes in and gets 100 where Roki Sasaki is. I'd be a little surprised, but it's in the range of outcomes.
Right.
So I think you're looking at this team and going, yeah, if we can get 2 more position players that even just get in on the back half of the top 100 or fringe top 100 guys in baseball, then we've got a chance, right? We may not be a team that's laden with superstars, but we'll just beat you by death by 1,000 cuts.
How many for it to be considered a successful season in your eyes would have to be in that? Or not a successful season. How many would have to be in your top 100, let's say next year, for you to feel better where the Cardinals are at? Is it only 2 more?
That's and I probably missed one. Helsley will be on this top 100 as well.
Yeah. Because I thought I saw, sorry to cut you off there, I thought I saw MLB Network say the teams that had the most players in the top 100, I want to pull this up so I don't incorrectly state it, but the Dodgers obviously were at the top with 8 of them, but you had the Toronto Blue Jays who had 5 of them. You had the Arizona Diamondbacks who had 5 of them. Is 5 the number that makes you feel like this is headed in the right direction?
I think 5 is probably the right number, and I mean they'll probably have 5, I would think, this year in the top 100.
But we don't. Nolan Arenado's not that for us. Ryan Helsley, I think we all expect to not be with this team.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was the Phillies, Diamondbacks, Cubs, and Blue Jays that had 5. Yankees had 6, Astros 6, Braves 7, Dodgers 8.
Yeah, I think 5's probably the right number. Like, even thinking of teams in years past, that's probably about where they were.
Yeah.
Like thinking back to 22 heading into that year, O'Neill would have been there, even though
Goldschmidt,
that year
Arenado.
Goldschmidt, Arenado.
Yachty would have been there just for how he played.
Yeah, like 4 to 5
Yeah.
is about the sweet spot, I would say, for the Cardinals. But again, like to your point, somebody's going to have to end up being like 20% above league average in their lineup to support Wilson Contreras, because I agree, Arenado's not that guy. I agree Mason Wynn's a good player, but I don't know if he's going to be a guy that's middle of the order bat for you. And then it comes back to Nootbaar, right? Does peak Lars happen? Does Von Herrera really take that next step? Does Walker become what we've always thought he was going to be? They need somebody to step up in that lineup.
Well, we'll find out if they do spring training, 3 weeks away?
We're about 2 weeks away.
So it's getting pretty darn close, especially even closer to our top 20 most important Cardinals players, which is going to be the best list you'll find out there on BK and Ferrario. He's Tanner Hendrickson. I'm Alex Ferrario. Coming up at 15, we've got the junk drawer. But coming up next, Alex Texier has probably the biggest opportunity of his career in front of him tonight against Colorado. What are we wanting to see from him moving forward? And Nick Leddy's skating. If he comes back, what does this team do with their lineup on the defensive side? All that next on BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN.
101 ESPN Sports Center.
I'm Jordan Deacon. The Sports Center update is brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling. The Blues play 2 times this weekend, kicking things off tonight in Colorado, taking on the Avalanche. Pregame show on 101 ESPN starts at 7, and then puck drop is at 8. They also play on Sunday, taking on the Utah Hockey Club with pregame at 6 and puck drop at 7. I'm Jordan Deacon. The Sports Center update was brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling, an independent American Standard heating and air conditioning dealer.
This is BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN. We're broadcasting live from the E&B Granite Studios at the Centene Community Ice Center. E&B Granite, Bernie Fedurko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring.
Well, like he did in that game in Detroit and when he was with them in Florida. You know, like play with pace, play with purpose, make plays, stay connected to the other two. They need to stay connected with him. It was a really good line there for us 2 games in a row.
So that's the voice of head coach Jim Montgomery when he was asked what to expect from Alex Texier, who, if you missed it, is going to be playing tonight with Robert Thomas and Pavel Buchnevich. That was the line combinations, according to Jeremy Rutherford, yesterday when they practiced. They're out in Colorado, their morning skates actually just getting underway, so we'll kind of see what those line combinations are going to look like. But the expectation is Texier to play with Pavel Buchnevich and Robert Thomas. And T-Bone, after we heard Doug Armstrong talk on Tuesday, it was very clear he needs to see what this player looks like. They got rid of Brandon Saad because essentially this was John Mozeliak saying, nope, you can't play with this toy anymore. I want to see what this guy looks like, and you trade the piece away. And that's what they're doing with Texier. I don't have a lot of high expectations for this because I might just be in the minority because this season I've fallen into the camp of, man, I don't see what the Blues see in Texier. He's fast. He's got a really good shot, but there's just a lot of circling in the offensive zone. Now, I'm not denying what Jim Montgomery said. For the 3-game span leading into the Winter Classic, I thought he deserved to play with Robert Thomas and Pavel Buchnevich. But then he got sick, came out of the lineup, and when he went back into the lineup, he never really got back to that consistent play that they were talking about. I'm looking at this as more of a statement towards Thomas and Buchnevich than it is for Alex Texier. Texier is not a top 6 winger. Texier is a third-line winger, a middle 6 winger for you at his best.
Amen.
They're putting him up there with Robert Thomas and Pavel Buchnevich to say, you guys need to start figuring this thing out. I'm going to look at Texier tonight as like, do you just contribute to the offense? Do you contribute to the puck possession in the offensive zone the same way I judged it with Zach Bolduc? Frankly, I think Bolduc should be in this spot, but Doug wants to see what Texier looks like, and this is a perfect opportunity for him to showcase it.
Yeah, I'm with you. I wanted to see Bolduc in this spot. I was a little taken aback by how much Doug Armstrong wanted to see Texier. But you know what? Might as well just throw everything at the wall and see what sticks. But I do like what you said about Buch and Thomas of, hey, figure out your ish, because great players can lift up that spot that's maybe a little weaker on your line.
If you don't believe me, look at Nathan McKinnon play with Jonathan Drouin over these last couple of years.
Yeah, 100%. I was going to bring up McDavid and Evander Kane. When Evander Kane was washed up, he kind of just disappeared off the face of the earth.
Or how about McDavid and Zach Hyman, who was a 15-goal scorer for the Toronto Maple Leafs and then shows up, goes 27, 36, and 54.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, we're talking about McJesus and Nathan McKinnon versus Robert Thomas.
Get to that level.
But if Greg Wyshynski labeled Robert Thomas as elite with us 2 days ago on the show. So if he's going to be labeled that.
Yeah. And that's why I loved when you brought that up, because, and again, Texier doesn't have to all of a sudden become like what Zach Hyman was, right? He doesn't have to become a 50-goal. I mean, that'd be great. I would quit ripping on Texier. But can you lift that player up to where you can get back to that 3-game stretch that you're talking about? Look, odds are this isn't going to work. We're going to get there's even a chance we get through one period and Monty's like, Army, dude, I'm sorry. Bolduc's going on that line. But I don't get their fascination with it. But Thomas and Boots should be able to at least be able to make it work with him, right? Those are the 2 guys that drive that line. That line shouldn't be really affected that much by who the third member is.
Right.
Because as we've always talked about, it's always pairings, right? And then you got that third guy there. This pairing of Thomas and Booch should be driving this line. Whether Texier, Bolduc, or Neighbors are on that line, That line needs to be more productive, and it doesn't. You can't just circle and blame the guy that keeps rotating in and out.
Right.
It's Thomas and Booch. I don't think we're going to see Texier last very long on this line, but it's worth giving him a shot.
My opinion on this is Texier is playing in this role tonight because they're starting to weed through their options. They got rid of the variables that they knew they could move on from that weren't going to play. Scott Perunovich wasn't going to play. Brandon Saad had played, wasn't living up to it, needed to move on. Now they're to the next list of those guys. And that's why Texier is playing up here. I don't know if you remember this, T-Bone, a few years ago. They did this with Zach Sanford. Zach Sanford was on the top line with Ryan O'Reilly and David Perron when they won the Stanley Cup. The next season, Zach Sanford got playing time in the top six, was inconsistent. The following season, Zach Sanford continued to get top six opportunities, was fine, but didn't live up to what the hope was for him. So what did they do? They moved on from him, and they went to find another guy. That's what this is. I remember Doug Armstrong talking about it was that 22-23 season to where he said, I was getting a lot of phone calls from a lot of agents saying, hey, why isn't my guy getting an opportunity? Why isn't my guy getting playing time? Why is he a fourth liner and getting a healthy scratch? And Doug's like, well, this is the season you're going to find out that your guy's not performing when we need him to perform. That's what they're doing here. Texier's getting top 6 minutes. Matthew Joseph has been in the third-line centerman role. I don't think they've tried it. They've never given him a shot in the top six, but I don't know if the Blues view him as a top six forward. Frankly, his role is a bottom six forward. Radek Fox is getting a third-line centerman role. Oscar Sundqvist has been getting a third-line center role. I know people have a lot of issues with Robert Thomas and Jordan Kyrou, Pavel Buchnevich, Braden Shen, the core members. But before you get to that, you do have to weed out what other guys are on our team. And Doug Armstrong's bold statement, not bold, but Doug Armstrong coming out saying our pro scout saw something in Texier, and now I'd like to see what they saw and give him an opportunity. That's him saying, hey, you told me this guy was worth a third-round draft pick. Let's go show me why he was. That's why Texier's playing up there tonight.
Yeah, no pressure, Texier, but not only is your spot on the roster potentially in jeopardy, so is that scout. You know, like
I don't know if Texier knows who the pro scout was that said hey, this would be a good fit for the Blues, but you got to imagine they're going to make a phone call and be like, hey man, please.
Yeah. And you can move on from him easily too, right? I mean, you mentioned 2.1 cap hit. Like, what's funny about it? That's only 100,000 more than Dylan Holloway.
Right.
So you can move on from him, but.
And frankly, he could go on waivers too.
Exactly.
You could put him on waivers and just do the same thing with Brandon Saad.
And we see that all the time at the NHL. $4.5 million is a little surprising when Saad goes on there.
Right.
1.5, we've seen that in the past. But you're right. Though they are trying to figure out what the core is, they're still trying to get answers on their bottom six. And the jury's still not out on what is Alexander Texier, Matthew Joseph. Like we've talked about it, at times these guys look really good and we've liked their game, but they're just too inconsistent. And even in the bottom six, you need some consistency, right? When you think back to, even the WTF line, when they've had that out there, always knew what you were going to get from that line. When you think back to the Stanley Cup team and you had that fourth line, you knew exactly what they were going to do. They're going to go out, they're going to set the tone for the hockey game. Right now you look at their third line, no idea what you're getting from that line night in, night out.
Yeah, I think there's two lines right now that you don't know what you're getting. One's the Thomas Buchnevich line, and the other is that third line. Yeah. Those are the two lines. You know what you're getting from your WTF line. You know what you're getting from Shen's line, which is why they haven't broken up that Braden Shen line. One other guy that you do know what you get when he plays, and that's experience, is Nick Leddy. Now, I think a lot of people have fallen into the same camp as Doug Armstrong of hey, when he's healthy, then we'll discuss. But for right now, I'm going to plan it as he's not healthy and won't play for us. But Montgomery had some comments yesterday saying look, he's climbing the stairs of where we need him to be. He's still probably post Four Nations tournament away from playing, but he's getting closer. T-Bone, I don't know where he fits in with this team when he's healthy. I've seen a ton of people text and ask, who comes out of the lineup when Nick Leddy's available? I think there's a couple of routes they go with this. I think you can go 11 forwards and 7 defensemen because by that time, you've already rotated through the Texiers, the Sundqvists, the Matthew Josephs. They could go 11 forwards and 7 defensemen and just say, nope, not good enough.
Don't speak that into existence. I hate when they do that.
I know, but, man, Craig Berube had a winning record with when it was 11-7.
Come on.
You knew it, man. You knew it.
I remember he's doing that in the playoffs. It's what's Perunovich's power play? Was he going to touch the ice 5-5? No.
No.
Okay. Do we have a fourth line? No. Oh.
The other option is you pull a Suter, a Tucker out of the lineup. And I don't want any of those guys coming out of the lineup. Ryan Suter has played and should deserve to stay in the lineup for how much of a stalwart he's been. Tyler Tucker has taken the step in the right direction. I'm not taking him out of the lineup and then just telling him, yep, you're going back to limbo. No, keep building on this. If there's one player that could come out, it's Justin Falk, who's underperformed. Here's the issue with that, though. You've got 5 left-handed defensemen playing in a game and only 1 righty. And I know players say it's not that big of an issue. I think it is when you're playing a full 60 minutes and you've got 5 guys who are playing on the left side and 2 of them are on their offhand. I don't know if that's the route they go, but you're still a little bit of ways from it. But it's going to be very fascinating to find out how they handle that when Nick Leddy is ready to return.
Yeah, I don't want to see Tucker or Suter out either, because I agree with you. I mean, they're playing fantastic so far, and especially Tucker. I'll give him his flowers. When he got called up and got put back in the line, I went, oh, my, we're getting so slow now. He's been great ever since being up here. Mm-hmm. My guess is it's one of 2 things. Either A, Leddy just sits in the press box when he is healthy, and, hey, until one of those guys really starts to falter, then you'll be back in.
Yeah.
Or they'll go the route of Tyler Tucker comes out, Leddy goes in, and you go with Leddy and Suter as your third pairing, because it's easier to kind of explain things to Tucker of, hey, he's got the contract, we're going to give him a little bit of runway, see if those early season struggles were related to the injury. It's a lot harder to say that to Suter, right? And Suter's even told us when we've talked to him before, like, hey, I'll speak up when I think something's not right and if I think I can do something better than that player. Suter's proven at age 40 throughout the entire season that he hasn't lost a step. We'll see on Tucker. My guess is they'll pull Tucker and put Leddy in his spot.
Yeah, and I hate that if they do it. Now, Tucker is waivers eligible, and you're not going to – I don't think you'd sneak him through waivers this time like you did the last time. I think next year your third-pair defensemen are going to be Tucker and Kessel. For how well Kessel's played, for how much Steve Konowalchuk talked about him yesterday on the show, which you can go back and check that out on our podcast page, 101ESPN.com, presented by Schaefer Door Company. That's your third pair next year. And I want my third pair playing as much as possible, so I don't want to put him in the press box. I do like that opinion. I do think maybe you just see Nick Leddy and say, hey, I'm glad you're healthy, you're playing well. We'll wait until there's an opportunity for you to get in the lineup. And from there, you're just going to have to wait to find out. But again, I don't think that's until post-Four Nations. Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Alex Ferrario. Coming up in 15, should the Blues be considering to call up Dalibor Dvorsky sooner rather than later? That and weeding out some of the question marks on this team for the Blues. But coming up next, we've got the Junk Drawer here on 101 ESPN.
live from the Centene Community Ice Center inside the E&B Granite Studios. This is BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN. E&B Granite, Bernie Federko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring. Let's open it up. The Junk Drawer with BK and Ferrario.
We've got Mike McKenna coming up in about 15 minutes. We'll get back into the blue side of things on the other side, but we've got the junk drawer. T-Bone, what do you got for us today?
All right. Have you ever purchased like a painting at a garage sale, or maybe you've gone to a relative's and just picked one up just from the basement that's kind of hiding around?
No, because I have this this dumb fear of picking up something that's cursed and bringing something back into my house. That becomes a problem.
Oh, really?
I've seen the movie Poltergeist way too much.
I don't know that one.
You don't know well, it's from like the 80s, so it makes sense that you don't know that one. But yeah, no, I have too much of a fear, and it's probably because I've watched way too many horror films. I have too much of a fear of bringing something cursed back into my house. Katie, when we had our first daughter, Adelaide, she found a nightstand, not a nightstand, a dresser on Facebook Marketplace. And she's like, I'll go get it from this person's house and bring it back. And, I can sand it, paint it, make it look good. I was very skeptical, and we got into an argument over it because I didn't want it because I thought it would be cursed and it would bring something back into our house.
Okay.
So I don't like to buy things that are like that.
Well, I wasn't expecting that.
Sorry, buddy.
The reason I asked this is because, when my grandparents' house got hit by a tornado, I don't know, it's probably been 3-4 years now at this point, we had some of their stuff. My mom brought it back home to our house back in Olney, and there's some paintings that were there. And I now need to double check and see if any of these are famous.
Yeah, you probably should.
Because there was a painting that was recently bought at a garage sale in Minnesota that the person just gave this away. It's a portrait of just kind of some guy smoking a cigar. It looks like he's out on a beach somewhere. And it looks, just like your typical painting. Someone painted this. Only for the person that bought this at the garage sale to find out it's a classic Vincent van Gogh original painting.
Bleep off.
And this person in Minnesota gave this away, not gave away, but sold it.
Probably for like $5.
At their garage sale in Minnesota. Just brutal.
So how did the person know that? Did they just Google it and say this looks pretty fancy?
It was acquired by a collector in 2016.
So that person probably went there and knew.
And they knew because of a word in the bottom right corner. Elimar or something like that. I think it might be Dutch, but I can't speak Dutch.
You don't speak Dutch, buddy?
I don't speak Dutch. I'll work on that, though. But, yeah, because, artists will they typically sign somewhere in the painting, or they'll put something in the painting that makes you know that it's theirs. Yeah, this person got rid of it. And
do they know how much it sold for? Did you say that?
No, I did not see in this article how much it was sold for.
And
I'm
maybe
sure it was undersold for what it should have been.
Yeah. No, I mean when the guy found it and realized that it was a very expensive painting.
No, I don't see
he didn't sell it. I bet he probably just kept it.
It's a huge painting, by the way, though. It is 18 by 16 and a half.
I will never.
Feels pretty big.
That's really big. I will never forget. Garage sales when you're a kid, you probably have lost so much money that you don't even realize. So there were two things that when I was younger, my mom used to do garage sales every year because it was just get rid of the clutter, get rid of the clutter. And as I got older, I stopped caring about some of the stuff. So I had an entire book of Pokemon cards. And it was the original ones. 1 through, I don't even remember how many there were. I think there were 50,
brutal.
something like that. She sold it for about $15. And now if you go back and look at it, the ones that I had, they're worth hundreds of dollars, probably thousands of dollars now for how people buy those collector cards. And then the other thing that I used to have was old school WWF wrestling figurines.
Oh, God.
And I mean, they were in the box. I wouldn't take them out. And those things sold a cardboard box of them, probably for $25 for all of them. Now you go online and look at what those were, thousands of dollars.
My grandma had old Star Wars.
Oh, my God.
Small, not action figures, but it was a little, I don't even know what you would call it. It was like a little set.
Yeah, like figurines, kind of.
It was small, but it was like, you could redo the battle
Real
of...
tiny ones.
The battle of, I think, Endor or whatever it is. And I remember it wasn't open.
You just pissed off a lot of Star Wars fans, probably.
I'm a Star Wars fan. Give me a break. I've been sick for 3 days. But it hadn't been open. But when I was young, I loved Star Wars, and I saw it. My girl was like, "Well, yeah, sure, we can open it up." I can't even imagine what it would be for today. And there was 2 of them, and they're super old. And we opened them up, and I played with them when I was growing up. And now I'm thinking back on that as you told that story. I'm like, oh, man, those things were probably worth a lot.
Do yourself a favor, and if you're listening, go back and ask your parents about garage sales that they used to have, and just think back to some of the stuff that they sold that was yours, and then think about the money that you just gave up.
Did you ever get the classic where Mom's like, we're having a garage sale, give it to everyone, and then you go outside and you're looking around, you're wait a minute, I didn't agree to get rid of that.
Yeah.
I had that happen all the time.
My mom would tell me we're having garage sales, and then it would be like I would put some stuff aside, and then she would go through my room and find more stuff. And it's like, oh, no. And then, lo and behold, you get some of the good stuff that was sold at those garage sales. So you've all probably been robbed blind of about $5,000 in your or in your lifetime just over those garage sales. Always fun to think about. With Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Alex Ferrario. Jordan Deacon back in our studios. We'll take a break. We'll come back. Should the Blues consider calling up Dalibor Dvorsky sooner rather than later? We'll discuss that next on 101 ESPN.
Law Firm. BK and Ferrario are broadcasting live from the E&B Granite Studios at the Centene Community Ice Center on 101 ESPN. E&B Granite, Bernie Federko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring.
works hard every day, wants to be a hockey player. And then you add on his skill. I mean, he has an elite shot, and he makes some special passes out there as well. So, yeah, it's a good, very good prospect, and he's a good future with the Blues. It's fun to coach him.
That's the voice of American Hockey League Springfield Thunderbirds head coach, Steve Konowalchuk, who was with us yesterday on BK and Ferrari. A little bit of news to pass along. Kevin Weeks reporting that Brandon Saad, who officially cleared waivers for the second time, so his contract was terminated by the Blues. He has signed a 1-year, $1.5 million contract to be a Vegas Golden Knight. It would be a prorated contract that Elliot Friedman is reporting on X. So again, Brandon Saad, who is officially cleared unconditional waivers, contract is terminated. So the Blues do not have the $4.5 million cap hit on their contracts this year or next year. Appears to have signed with the Vegas Golden Knights. So it'll be interesting to see how Brandon Saad fits in. That's a perfect spot for him if you're a middle six forward. They've got their top dudes. They've got Barbashev, Stone, Jack Eichel. When they're healthy, they've got William Karlsson. They've got Tomas Hertl. I figured it was going to be a team that he could fit right in and be a middle six forward and has a shot to win a Stanley Cup. And frankly, that's why I think he made that decision to terminate the contract and walk away from $4.5 million, because Brandon Saad is 32 years old, if I'm not mistaken, or is he 33 years old? He's 32 years old. There's some pride that goes into that. And my tinfoil is a team called him and said, look, we can't afford you for $4.5 million, but we do want you on our team. So if you can find a way to get out of your contract, we'll bring you in. And I think that's what took place. And frankly, for Brandon Saad, good for him. And let's not overreact, Blues fans. If he goes to Vegas and has success again, it wasn't going to happen in St. Louis. I think the time had come. Friedman said on his podcast that he was talking with a couple of different scouts that basically told him, like, man, that's a different Brandon Saad. When we saw Brandon Saad, he was a dog on the forecheck, and now he's just not as effective. I think it just finally dissipated in St. Louis, and now he's going to get a shot to go play for the Vegas Golden Knights.
Yeah, I mean, it makes perfect sense for him, and you're right. I mean, they're top six. They've got their dudes in there, and I think that's what the story had kind of become here in St. Louis. Not that you don't have the dudes, but your dudes weren't playing well, right? Thomas and Buchnevich weren't playing well. Saad fits more as a third liner. That's what he was signed to do when he first got here. Perfect guy. Sign, third line, give you 20 goals every single season. And at this point, they were asking him to do more just because they didn't have the pieces around there. And now when he goes to Vegas, he can slide into a better role for himself.
Yeah, we have Mike McKenna, who's going to join us in about 10 minutes or so. We'll get his thoughts on Brandon Saad and where the Blues are at. But, T-Bone, let's get to Dalibor Dvorsky. We heard Steve Konowalchuk on the return there talking about Dvorsky's play this year in the American Hockey League. And I think a lot of people are probably on the same page of there's no point in bringing him up. This team right now is struggling. This team, you don't really want to bring him into the locker room. But you are missing out on an opportunity to get NHL opportunities for Dalibor Dvorsky. Where do you fall on their decision, at least according to Doug Armstrong, that it's not time to call Dvorsky or any of the other young players that are playing in the American Hockey League up yet?
Yeah, I mean, the Blues essentially have kind of started to wave the white flag. I mean, when you put Saad on waivers and have Doug Armstrong come out and speak and is very critical of the core of players, and you've kind of fallen, I don't want to say completely fallen out of the race, but you're falling behind in this race. Unless they win 4 straight heading into the Four Nations, which would be shocking considering they haven't won 3 straight all season, I think once you get past Four Nations, I think it's time for Dvorsky to be up here. I think it's better for him. Look, he's gotten his cup of coffee at the AHL. He's learned. You heard the head coach from the AHL Thunderbirds talking, raving about his game. Like, it sounds like he's doing everything right down there in Springfield. Now, maybe there's still some of that stuff you want him to learn away from the puck. But look, I think right now the best thing for him is experience at the NHL, where you have such high expectations for him moving forward in this retool. I think it's better for him to get 30-ish games under his belt here at the NHL level rather than sitting and waiting a couple more weeks, maybe even post-trade deadline, or even waiting until you get to like the final month of the season. I think it's better for you as soon as possible to get him up to the NHL level and get him experience, learn with a Braden Shen. I'm not even saying he's got to be centerman when he gets up here.
Yeah.
Learn with Braden Shen. Learn with Robert Thomas. I think that experience is so much more valuable here at the NHL level that I think we're getting to that point. Post-Four Nations, I think he should be up here with the St. Louis Blues.
Not yet. For me, not yet. He still has some learning to do in the AHL. And the reason I say that is, you know how many goals he has scored since his return from the World Juniors tournament?
Yeah, trick game, so probably 10.
1. He scored 1. You know how many points he has since the World Juniors tournament?
1.
5. So in a total of, quick math, 9 games, he's got 1 goal and 5 points. And that's not that big of an issue to me. My issue is looking at the plus minus. And I know people, it's a fickle stat. I understand it. But it's just for me the ability to measure how a player is performing on both sides of the ice. He was a -3 in one game, a -1 in 2 others. He was a plus in 1, and then 5, he was an even. I still think there's some learning to do on the other side of the ice for Dalibor Dvorsky. And the other, and in my opinion, the bigger reason why it's not time yet, is this Blues team's got to figure out their own ish before I bring up Dalibor Dvorsky. What I don't want to happen is bring him up into this, I'm trying to think of the right word.
Mess.
Yeah, I mean, essentially,
word.
yes. Like, there's a lot going on by this group to where you bring a younger player up and you put him in a position that says, hey, we're pushing for a, to whereas, let's say the trade deadline comes and goes and this team has basically been told by their front office, no, you're not a playoff team. And I think they probably already have, but if you bring them up now or even that first week after the Four Nations tournament, the team is still in the mindset of let's push for the playoffs. And I don't think that'll ever change, but the demeanor of a team when a front office doesn't make moves or trades players away is, all right, it's probably going to be next season where we have our opportunity to push. So then you don't have the drama of guys getting upset with each other if they're not playing the 60-minute effort on the ice. Then he could just come up and he can play hockey. That's where I think you want to put Dalibor Dvorsky into a situation. And frankly, any of these other guys, Kaskamaki, Dylan Peterson, some of the guys on the defensive side, let them go for a playoff spot in the Springfield Thunderbirds organization. They'll get their taste of the NHL at some point this year. But for right now, I don't know if I want to put them in this mess for the Blues.
Yeah, I just think it is so much value. This is where we've kind of gone back and forth in the past. I just think it's so much more valuable to get experience.
I don't disagree.
At the NHL, let's just be honest. Everybody says Jim Montgomery is one of the best in the NHL, right? I mean, that was the whole reason you fired Drew Bannister and brought him in. So bring him up. I think that's more valuable to learn what to work with Monty on this kind of stuff. And again, I don't even think it necessarily has to be a center. But if we're going on like, hey, well, right now we got to kind of figure out our ish because right now it's a mess. Is that going to change? Like, I don't know if that ever changed. What was it, 2 years ago when they had that same situation with Jake Neighbors?
Yeah,
where they sent him down and they were like, hey, this is a disaster. We can't have him up here. And it's not anything with Jake Neighbors. It's more of, hey, we can't get our ish together. Well, what makes us think that that's going to change this year, right? Didn't really change 2 years ago. In fact, they ended up trading away. I think that was the year they traded away O'Reilly and Tarasenko and Barbashev. Like, I don't know that it can be fixed in season with what their issues are in that core. I think you almost just have to bring in Dvorsky, see if he can bring a little bit of a spark too, right? That young spark that can come to a locker room when you bring him up. And I think they've admitted they're kind of done pushing for the playoffs. They haven't said it publicly, but when you wave Brandon Saad and you take a shot at your core, as Doug Armstrong did, and said, hey, well, we may have to make tougher decisions. These guys don't figure it out. That was kind of a, hey, we're already sellers. So I think it's time that we start having that conversation more seriously, that he gets up here and sooner rather than later.
Couple of nuggets for you from Blues practice today. Texier is playing with Robert Thomas and Pavel Buchnevich. That's your top line. Nathan Walker is going to be centering Jake Neighbors and Zach Bolduc. So Fox is going to go play with Toropchenko and Matthew Joseph. So breaking up that WTF line, my guess is they want speed on that third line against this Colorado Avalanche squad. And then Joel Hofer's in between the pipes. So Joel Hofer has not in his career.
Oh, good.
Jordan Binnington, of course, has had a lot of success, but this falls right back in line with a 2-to-1 ratio. Binnington played the last 2 games. Hofer gets this one. So if you're going to go 2-1, that means Binnington is going to get the game against Utah, which he was the one that played against the Utah Hockey Club when it was the 6-4 loss, or not the 6-4 loss, whatever, the 4-2 loss against Utah about a week ago. And then he would get the game against Edmonton, if I'm not mistaken, and then you'd get one for Joel Hofer, and then the final 2 games for Jordan Binnington. So the 2-1 thing kind of sticks into what Jim Montgomery and company have said about the Blues. They've got puck drop tonight at 8 o'clock. I've got your First Community Credit Union pregame beginning at 7. We've got Mike McKenna joining us next on 101 ESPN.
Going between the pipes with former NHL goaltender Mike McKenna.
Save by Mike McKenna. How do you like me now?
Between the Pipes is refreshed by Macadoodle Spirits, fine wine, beer, and cigars. Now open in Darden Prairie.
It's a Friday, which means we head to our guest line to welcome in our weekly guest, Mike McKenna, former NHL, American Hockey League, ECHL goaltender. He's seen it at every single level, but more importantly, he is a part of the Macadoodles crew out in Darden Prairie. And Mike McKenna always joins us courtesy of Macadoodles. Mike, how are you, buddy?
Oh, hanging in there, doing the doldrums here at Dry January, and I got something fun for later. We're going to have out on the socials. We're going to do something a little hockey themed out here at Macadoodles. I think we have to. We haven't seen Blues hockey now in 4 days.
My wife looked at me last night at the dinner table and she goes, "Why haven't you had a Blues game in 3 days?" She goes, "What's going on?" So anytime my wife asks that, you know it's kind of a quirky schedule going on in the NHL.
It's also a question of, does she want you at home or not? Why haven't you left the house?
Yeah, I already know the answer to that one. I think it's her and my daughters want me out of the house every once in a while. Well, Mike, speaking of fun, I do have to ask you because for those that don't know, Mike's dad is an off-ice official for the St. Louis Blues for the NHL, I should say. He's at Enterprise Center. He's been there. He's been doing that for a long time, if I'm not mistaken, Mike. But a really cool moment for you and your family, who he just called it a career yesterday.
Yeah, it is. Dad was, he was a dentist in West St. Louis County for, almost 50 years now, and closed the doors. And he'll probably be mad for me putting it out there, but it's closed. It's nobody on the books, so
can't get mad at you anymore.
Yeah, it's really cool. You start to think back on somebody's career and what they did for you as a parent, and all the time he was able to make to be at my games and how he was, provided for us, but also did it the right way. I mean, the guy drives a Dodge Caravan. He's a dentist, right? He doesn't have to, but that's what he chooses to. And I don't know. I think the world of my dad. I love him like crazy, and it was cool. But it also got me thinking that, he's not done working. He's still an off-ice official for the NHL, and he's been like that now for, since the early 70s. And my grandpa was the first one in the family. Grandpa Bill was an off-ice official with the Blues, and before that, a linesman in the old Central Hockey League at St. Louis Blues and St. Louis Braves games in the 1960s. So I think what I kind of just wanted to say is that these off-ice officials are a little bit of unsung, maybe not heroes, but unsung pieces of the machine that is the NHL. They've got a crew of a dozen people or so, maybe more than that they're official scorers, they're game timekeepers, they're opening doors downstairs, they're video replay. They're just all these things that they're just weekend warriors. They come in and do the game that evening, and you guys see them upstairs in the press box, and they've got their black jackets on for the NHL. And so when you hear them announce before the game, they play a really important role. But for them, it is a bit of work, but it's also kind of social hour too, before and after. So it just stuck with me today that I think those off-ice officials deserve some recognition, and Dad's been lucky enough to be on that crew now for, decades.
I love it. Congratulations to him on retirement for one side and continuing to chug along on the other side. Turning in the white coat for the black coat now as the off-ice official out at Enterprise Center. So, Mike, obviously a lot going on with this Blues team. They lose to versus Vancouver on Monday. Brandon Saad gets put on waivers on Tuesday. Doug Armstrong speaks with the media to talk about the struggles and the inconsistencies for the last 3 years with this team. Give us a locker room perspective when your president of hockey operations, one, makes a roster move as kind of big as Brandon Saad being placed on waivers, and then talking to the media about the struggles and inconsistencies of the team. What's the locker room chatter after something like that?
Well, I think they're really, if they weren't on guard before, they definitely are now. You put somebody like Saad on waivers, who's had great success in the NHL. He's won Stanley Cups. He's been a critical piece of the Blues. Scored, 26 goals last year, I want to say? Yeah. And this year hasn't gone his way. But really what it kind of boils down to is that Doug Armstrong is saying, you know what? We've tried 3 coaches. We've largely had the same top end, and we're not getting it done. We've got young players on the way. Now, they're not coming. Now, it was interesting that he didn't say they're just going to call everybody up from Springfield and run it. He more or less said, this is kind of who we have right now. We want to see what they do. We want to see what Texier can do and others. He really put the ball in the court of the top players, and it's not veiled. Everybody knows it. It's just not getting enough. And the irony, though, is that Jordan Kyrou, who's been a whipping boy for the last couple of years, he's been great this year. I mean, that line with Holloway and Shen. And guys, I think Shen's play is just so indicative of him being healthy this year. Armstrong mentioned him having a bit of a down season last year. Well, he was pretty beat up, and this year he's feeling great. He's playing hard. That line's really going. It was great to see Holloway score a one-timer on the power play. That's been missing from the team. But it just really puts a guy like Pavel Buchnevich right in the crosshairs to me that you need something more from. I haven't heard that much about it this year, but that's another player there that you got to get it. If you're going to be in the top 6, let's go, So I think you kind of put everybody on blast that way, that this is our team, start performing, or we will start to change bigger pieces of the puzzle, not just little ones, like moving out Perunovic.
And, Mike, that doesn't feel like something that could get done at a trade deadline, right? That feels like
Correct.
Hey, you've got the rest of this season to try and figure it out. And then if we have to, we will make that move if necessary.
Yeah, I agree with you completely on that. This sounded to me like, hey, this is our team, and we're not – it sounded like we're not adding. I don't know about you guys, but I think it really was the watershed moment of – man, if we make the playoffs, it's because Monty somehow got the team to finally win 7 or 8 games in a row and get on a roll, and we did it with the guys in the room. That's what it sounded like to me. Not adding. It sounded like the team could be in sell mode if they have to by the line. He did mention retooling. That's a key word, guys. So I do think that they're retooling. They know players are coming. I did like his approach, though, to leave some of the top prospects that are in Springfield. There's a lot of value in that. Having been through that role before myself, it matters, guys. So they really just need you need 10% more out of everybody except for that top line, honestly. They're the ones, Parayko and that top line now, Kyrou, Holloway, and Shen. They need 10-15% more out of everybody else.
Mike, if you don't mind, allude on that a little bit. Why does it matter to give more seasoning to these young guys in the American Hockey League rather than give them NHL reps?
When you get to the NHL, you need to be ready for it unless it's a fill-in role. And it's kind of tough to explain that in some ways because if you're in the NHL, you should be ready for it. You're a great hockey player. Listen, if you're in the NHL, you are a great hockey player. I don't care what your role is. You are an unbelievable player. But you can see players become stunted if they show up too early. Dalibor Dvorsky, if you bring him up to the NHL right now, is he going to be the top version of himself versus dominating the American Hockey League, maybe going on a playoff run? Like, these things matter. And that's what I've seen. Like Nikita Alexandrov may be a guy who went a little too early at times, right? He's been pretty good down there, but has he cracked the lineup permanently? No. So I think there's a real hang up to that, trying to make sure that players are ready, that when they come up, they can do more than just play a top line or two. And that's what you learn when you start grinding for a while is you're not going to make it to the NHL in your perfect position very often. You got to be ready to grind. And after 6 months in the American League, you're not ready to grind in the NHL. I don't care who you are. You're just not.
We're talking with Mike McKenna, former NHL goalie, who is with us on behalf of Macadoodles. We'll talk about Macadoodles in just a couple of moments. Mike's with us on the Calgary and Thompson hotline. So, Mike, going back to those top players, to me it really felt like Doug Armstrong was talking about the guys who have been here for 3+ years. And that's the Shens, the Paraykos, the Binningtons. But most importantly, it's the Thomas, the Kyrous, and the Pavel Buchneviches. You said that, it kind of puts Pavel Buchnevich right in the spotlight. If this team struggles continue for the rest of this year, that's going to be 3 straight years that this team has missed the playoffs, which, if I'm not mistaken, it has not happened since the mid-2000s when they were in that lockout area. Does a massive shakeup need to take place for the Blues with their top players, their core players, if this continues for one more year?
I'd look around the league and make that judgment call. What teams in the NHL have had the most success lately? Who's won the Stanley Cups? Last year, Florida wins it. What led to them winning the Stanley Cup? What was it? What do you think? You guys give me an answer on this one. What led to them winning?
Matthew Tkachuk trade.
Yes. Yes. Teams have to be aggressive. The Vegas Golden Knights. Are they passive when it comes to making deals? We know all too well in St. Louis that's not the case. Okay. I think absolutely that could happen. And that's, again, like somebody like a Buchnevich who signed for another, 5 years at $8 million, $6 million, 6 years at it. That'd be a hard contract to move, but do you have to make a move like that? Right? Like I still don't see them moving Kyrou or Thomas. I can't imagine moving on Thomas. Kyrou's been playing great with that line. But the rest of that crew, and who goes into that mix, right? I don't think you want to lose a Jake Neighbors ever, but that's a piece that could really create some headspace, right? And that's, like, think about it. If you're trying to get a Brady Tkachuk, okay, I'm just being objective here, and this is nothing rooted in anything, but if you're trying to get a Brady Tkachuk, if you put a Jake Neighbors with somebody, you know what I mean? Like, suddenly a deal seems better than if it's someone else, right? And I'm just thinking out loud here is all I'm doing, but I don't think you can just run it back with the same top players and wait for the younger kids. I don't. I think you'd have to make something a little bit dramatic if you can possibly pull it off, and we'll see. Maybe it's goaltending, maybe it's somewhere else. You just never know.
And Mike, you had said, like, it's hard to imagine them making a move with Kyrou or Thomas potentially. Is there anybody, though, that is like 100% no matter what, if this continues the way that it is in that scenario that Alex mentioned, is there anybody on this roster that you look at and say, no matter what, we will not move on from this guy?
Colton Parayko. There's it. That's the one. That is absolutely, you will not move Colton Parayko. That to me, I just could not fathom that. Beyond him, I think Robert Thomas is in that mix that you just wouldn't. I see more there. I see someone that really should be taking over this team in a leadership role eventually as well. I just, beyond them, I don't know. I still think you could trade a Kyrou because you haven't seen a full consistency over the course of the year. It's taken Magic Partners. But you could move on if you found the right deal. That could easily happen. I think Parayko is the guy. But even a Jordan Binnington, remember there were rumors flying around about him previously the last couple of years. I don't know if there's any truth to them at all, but that would be a big shakeup if you believe in Joel Hofer. I mean, that's a player that is probably still available in some capacity, the tiniest amount, but still could be.
What about Broberg and Holloway? I know it's only been 1 year, and Holloway's been a point-per-game guy under Jim Montgomery, but what about those two?
Well, their contracts are so good, you're not going to want to move on from them. I'd be surprised Holloway more than Broberg, but at this point, who's going to want Broberg at a big piece of a puzzle? He's shown a lot of talent early on, but ever since his injury, it's been a little bit different. So Holloway would be in my 95% we are keeping you range, right? We don't want to move on from you because you've been a core piece that has created some chemistry and given a big influx of energy for me more than anything else. And the skill set we're seeing from him continues to expand in games.
All right, Mike, before we let you go, you mentioned something in the works, a little hockey-related over at Macadoodles out in Darting Prairie. Tell us about it.
Well, it's dry January, and I got a big plan. You're going to have to keep an eye on our social media, but I'm going to put an end to dry January today out back. I'm going to go out back behind the building, and you guys will see it on social media later today. But we've been having fun. What we've been doing as January slows down a bit is just making sure everything about our store is perfect, that you can find everything, that the pricing is right, that our selection is where it needs to be. We're still getting in some interesting things here and there. I just got 6 more bottles of Penelope Havana today, and now they're not all going to go out today. I'm putting them out one a day out there, folks. One a day is what I've been putting them out at different times. But we're still getting some things like that, which is a lot of fun. So got some Woodford Reserve Masters collection in the building. We got a ton of good wines that have been in. It's going to be interesting here, and we're just gearing up for March. We got a big Irish Whiskey Festival coming on March 13th from 4 to 6. Bagpipes, allocated bottles, running hot deals. We're only a month away from that, but it's going to happen.
And let me tell you, when you get to Macadoodles, it's incredible customer service as well. And Mike, of course, is the man in charge out at Macadoodles in Darting Prairie. So get out there and tell him BK and Ferrario and Mike McKenna sent you. Mike, have a great rest of your weekend, my man, and we look forward to chatting with you again next Friday.
You as well, fellas, and man, go Blues. I'd sure like to see a good game against Colorado here. I'm hoping for a big one. They need to respond.
I'd like to see a string of wins at some point, Mike. So let's see if we can get a 3-game win streak started tonight.
Well, it's got to happen at some point in the year, right? It's no better time than now. I
hope so. There you go. Love talking to Mike McKenna, always with us on our Fridays. And T-Bone, I think Mike is a hockey fan. That's first and foremost. And Mike is not giving any insider information when he's with us. We're getting a former player's perspective. But this is a guy who spent a lot of times in the National Hockey League, a lot of times in the American Hockey League, and a lot of times he has spent around front offices and coaches. And what I think Mike said is where you and I fall. And frankly, I also believe it's where the front office has fallen. You can't keep doing the same thing every single season if the inconsistencies and if the same topics keep coming up. And so if it continues, and it's a big if, all capital letters, because they could go on a win streak. They could play well down the stretch. But if the struggles and the inconsistencies to continue, I have to imagine they're going to look at this and say, we have to make some type of roster shakeup. I don't know what, I don't know who, but there's going to have to be a shakeup.
Yeah, I agree. I think if you get to the end of the season, and again, I agree with what Mike said. I don't think you can do that kind of move at the trade deadline.
No.
But you get to the end of the season, it's 3 straight years, and it's not only 3 straight years missing the playoffs. It's 3 straight years of the same problems occurring, right, with the same core of not being ready to start games on time, being questioned on compete at times. As Jim Montgomery, he didn't come out and say it very aggressively, but, hey, we're working on board battles. You know what that is? That's compete. We're not competing hard enough in these games. So the fact that it's been the same issue consistently for 3 years with the same core and 3 different head coaches, there's no more just kind of, okay, well, we'll rearrange the bottom 6. Maybe we'll bring in a defenseman, and, maybe a new assistant coach helps out. No, we've talked – Army had mentioned the hourglass when he fired Berube, right? Mm-hmm. We're going to try and get these answers. Well, it happened to be a long hourglass. Now we're getting the answers if it might be the core. And if they don't get this turned around and they miss for the 3rd straight year, they're going to have to make a significant change. And it may even be one that it is, look, I agree. Thomas probably last on that list of players. But if he ends up being the guy that you need to move on from because he has some value across the board and just need to do a hockey trade to change things up, it is something they will have to not explore, but at least consider in the offseason.
Yeah. He's Tanner Hendrickson. I'm Alex Ferrario. Again, Blues back in action tonight against the Avalanche, looking to avoid a 4-game losing streak, which I believe they've only done 2 other times this year. The Blues will drop the puck tonight against Colorado at 8, pregame beginning at 7. We've got a surprise on the other side, because as football is winding down, we've got one more game, and that's next Sunday. So our weekend look ahead is going to shift a little bit. And we're going to go back to Old Faithful, T-Bone. It's everyone's favorite.
Oh, yeah.
One's got to go. You send us 3 options. We will tell you which one's got to go. We'll get to that next on BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN.
.101 ESPN Sports Center.
I'm Jordan Deacon. The Sports Center update is driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. We've got a lot happening on 101 ESPN this weekend, starting tonight with the Blues taking on the Colorado Avalanche. Pre-game show with Alex Ferrario starts at 7, and then puck drop is at 8. Tomorrow, we've got college basketball action for you. Tennessee taking on Florida. Pre-game starts at 10:30, and then Duke takes on North Carolina with pre-game at 5:15. Topping it off on Sunday, we have Pro Bowl action starting at 2 o'clock, and then the Blues and Utah Hockey Club will wrap up the weekend for us with pregame at 6 and puck drop at 7. If you missed anything from today's show, be sure to check out the podcast at 101ESPN.com or from your free 101 mobile app. I'm Jordan Deacon. The Sports Center update was driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
This is BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN. We're broadcasting live from the E&B Granite Studios at the Centene Community Ice Center. E&B Granite, Bernie Fedorko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring. This is BK and Ferrario. Time now for One's Gotta Go. We offer up the talking points, and you get to pick which one's gotta go on 101 ESPN.
Count that big pen.
Well, it's been a while. I think it's been since August that we've had a One's Gotta Go segment. And you know what's so sweet about it, T-Bone? BK's not here.
I know.
BK probably would have fought against it. He would have said, no, it's not time to do it yet. But we make the decisions.
Yeah.
We're a team.
Yeah, well, he doesn't operate that way, but yeah.
No, well, he doesn't. When we're together, it's a democracy. When BK's here, it's a dictatorship. He takes over.
Yeah, exactly.
There's no fearless leader here.
I wasn't
it's
the
just
one
teammates.
who got rid of One's Gotta Go.
I would have never gotten rid of One's Gotta Go.
My favorite segment. The only reason I work on this show.
It's the only reason I work on Fridays is for One's Gotta Go. So if you're not familiar with this show benchmark, you send us 3 options of anything. Whatever you want to do. Food, movies, actors, dog breeds, whatever you want. You send us 3 options. We'll tell you which one's got to get up on out of there, and we'll give you a reason why. Jordan Deacon will jump in on this one with us as well. Send them over to our Air Comfort Service text line, 314-399-9646. Also, you can send them in over on our YouTube channel at 101 ESPN STL. Let's start with this from the 314. One's got to go rivalry edition. The Cubs, the Blackhawks, or the Milwaukee Brewers. So I'm going to take this more so, T-Bone, as history of them, or do you want to do it the future, like what it is this upcoming season?
I'd say combine all that.
Let's do it.
Weigh it all.
Weigh it all. All right, go for it.
I would say get rid of the Brewers one, because the Brewers rivalry, at least in my lifetime, was only interesting in like 2011. Kind of picked back up over the recent couple of years. You can't replace Cubs Cardinals, even when they're not very good. It's still a fun atmosphere for those games. Blackhawks Blues is always fun. I mean, the Blackhawks suck, and they still sold out Wrigley Field.
That's true.
For the Winter Classic.
That's true.
Those two stay. Get rid of the Milwaukee one for me.
There was a lot of St. Louis fans at Wrigley Field, though, that's for sure. Jordan Deacon, what do you say?
I also agree with Tanner. The Chicago versus St. Louis rivalry is just too good to give up for me. Like, even if you're not connected in sports, you know that those cities just do not really like each other. So I will have to get rid of the Milwaukee Brewers as well.
Sweep it. The Brewers don't even compare to the Cubs and Blackhawks, whether it's the future, what it's going to look like, or the past. From the 314, one's got to go. Vacation days, annual bonuses, or a small pay raise?
Ooh. I will go with the. Well, I don't get a bonus now, so I'll go with that one. Everybody loves a small pay raise. I would say vacation days, but there's something nice about like just stepping away, taking a day off, or even a week off. Like that's what I typically do right around Christmas time. Just take a week off. Nothing better than burning some vacation days. So I would say the bonus. That would be my thing.
Yeah, I think mine would be the bonus as well. Career-wise, there's nothing that feels better and more gratifying than when your boss says, hey, we're going to give you a raise. Even if it's a little, it's like, damn, okay, I did a good job. And there's nothing that beats vacation days. I'm like T-Bone. I take vacation weeks because one day is too little. I need like 5 days to where it really feels like you shut it down for a little bit, and then you get to go somewhere fun. Jordan, what about you?
Agreeing with you guys again. My mom has worked her booty off last year and got a very nice bonus, but I have never experienced that, so I'm going to have to get rid of the bonus because, yeah, you can't get rid of those vacation days. Those are a necessity for everybody involved.
The bonus is fun, but it's like, okay, when am I going to get it again? To where, like, the raise is like you work your butt off, you get it, and then, of course, those vacation days. One's got to go quarterback edition. Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, or Josh Allen?
Mahomes, I hate that guy. I'm
okay,
tired.
just because you hate him, T-Bone.
Of seeing him in the damn Super Bowl.
Oh, yeah, next year's going to
suck. I want to see somebody else. So get Mahomes the hell out of here.
Next week is going to suck.
I'm just going to really quickly second that with no comment.
I'm going with Lamar Jackson. Like, you guys can hate Patrick Mahomes all you want. I want to see two of the best.
No.
And everyone responded being like, Lamar Jackson's got multiple MVPs. That's fine. I like playoff action. And watching Mahomes and Josh Allen, you can't replicate that with any other quarterbacks in the NFL. You cannot replicate what those two guys give us every time they play against each other.
I don't care.
Just because you hate his face, T-Bone. I hate BK's face, but we find ways to power through.
I don't care. Nice. I hate watching the Chiefs. I hate watching them win. I don't care. Get rid of them.
One's got to go Dvorsky, Snuggerud, or Lindstein.
I guess Lindstein would be my answer just because he gets kind of, what, isn't it Lindstein?
No, it's Lindstein.
Oh.
I say Lindstein and I mispronounce it. It's Theo Lindstein. Actually, I think it might be Theo Lindstein, but who knows with how people pronounce names, because Alex Pietrangelo was Alex Peterangelo for probably about the first 10 years he played in the National Hockey League.
And during the Stanley Cup final run.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would go Lindstein then, just because he's the one that doesn't get talked about a lot.
Mm-hmm.
It's always Dvorsky, it's Snuggerud. So I don't know what Lindstein's role is that moving forward, since he's never brought up unless asked about. So I would say him.
Man, this one's tough because if it was anybody other than Lindstein, I would say that player. But you got to have another defenseman in the system. Like, Broberg is great, but you've got a lot of older players, and there's just not another top four potential defenseman that you've got in your system. But with that being said, man, I have to keep Snuggerud and Dvorsky because those two seem like they're going to be pillars, or at least the Blues are hoping that they are. And if Lindstein's not, then you're just going to be searching for it, and you got Broberg. So I'll say Lindstein.
Agreed. He's not necessarily the next man up when you're thinking about, like, Dvorsky's always being asked if he's going to be brought up. Jimmy Snuggerud is all over my Twitter/X timeline all the time. So, yeah, he's just not necessarily the next man up in those three. So I would have to agree with you guys.
One's got to go from the 314, and you could send us your scenarios of one's got to go to our Air Comfort Service text line 314-399-9646. One's got to go: a home run in baseball, a dunk in the NBA, or a penalty shot in the NHL. This one is super simple.
Are you thinking what I'm thinking?
Yeah.
All right.
Should we say it on three?
2, yeah, let's all say it on 3. 3, 2, 1,
dunk.
NBA dunk.
Oh, really?
What's yours?
Mine's penalty shootout.
Get the hell out of here. No, not a shootout, a penalty shot.
Yeah, who cares?
Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
In the middle of a game, you get a one shot that could change the outcome of that game.
Yep.
Dude, I can dunk on somebody? Yeah.
It's over
No,
with,
it's
though.
not
And
you can do it.
I know, but a dunk, that is so much cooler than a penalty shot.
Oh, it's over so much faster.
Oh, you don't, yeah, but you don't see a penalty shot like on the Sports Center's top 10.
Are you kidding me? Yeah, you do, man.
No,
Pavel Datsyuk has one of the best penalty shot goals that I have ever seen.
No, that's ridiculous.
No, that's a terrible take. And it's, of course, this is it, too, because T-Bone's like NBA guy, and I'm the hockey person. Jordan's the hockey person.
I can't stand to watch the NBA anymore, but I think a dunk is so much cooler
But
than
it happens all the time. You rarely get to see penalty shots.
Sure, but there are so many cool different versions of a dunk. Like, it's one thing if it was, hey, a breakaway dunk versus a penalty shot. But even then, they can do all kinds of cool things. Off the backboard, 360, slam it, windmill. Oh, you got the lob where LeBron goes over. I don't remember who it was. The small player for the Bulls in the playoffs. I can't remember his name.
Derrick Rose?
No, it wasn't Rose. I can't remember the point guard's name. Nate Robinson.
Oh, yeah.
Where he like climbs up over the top of him and dunks it. You don't get that in a penalty shot. I'm out. Penalty shot's got to go.
I agree with you, Alex. It's 2 against 1.
That's a terrible take, T-Bone. Terrible take. Tanner Hendrickson, Jordan Deacon, I'm Alex Ferrario. God, we end on a bad note, too, T-Bone. We're always supposed to end on a positive note.
The penalty shot's so boring.
Are you kidding me? I'm not going to argue this. I'm not going to argue this with you.
I can't even believe that is your answer.
Jordan and I win 2-1. It doesn't even matter. We'll come back with a rewind next on 101 ESPN.
Live from the Centene Community Ice Center inside the E&B Granite Studios, this is BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN. E&B Granite, Bernie Federko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring. Let's run it back with a daily rewind on BK and Ferrario. Brought to you by Gloria Lou, your home sold guaranteed realty. Selling your home begins at GloriaHasTheBuyers.com.
Been a great show, great week since BK has left. So congratulations to us, T-Bone, even though I know you weren't here Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. But powering through today, which you're a champ for that one. And so is Jordan Deacon filling in for us today. Appreciate her. And then, of course, Bradford Bruns, Graham Francis, who have done a great job over these last couple of days. If you've missed anything from the show today, where we talked with Mike McKenna, former NHL goaltender, talked about the salary cap rising in the NHL, talked a little Cardinals. You can check all of that out on our podcast page a little bit after the show is completed today. That podcast is presented by
Schaefer Door Company.
Oh, yeah, it feels so good. T-Bone doing that one for us. You can check it out on the 101 ESPN app, the free 101 ESPN app, which is presented by Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers. Blues back in action tonight, taking on the Colorado Avalanche in the midst of a 3-game losing skid, looking to get back in the win column after Brandon Saad was passed through waivers. He was unclaimed. Looks like he's going to be signing with the Vegas Golden Knights. That's what at least the reports are from Kevin Weeks, Elliot Friedman, Jeremy Rutherford. Scott Perunovich was traded over on Monday. And for the Blues, their president of hockey operations is looking for this team to respond. T-Bone, do you expect a response tonight against Colorado, and what are you looking for?
Yeah, I think they're going to respond. I think they are the definition of a 500 team, so I don't think they're going to have this long valley where they have a big losing streak. Mm-hmm. One thing I am curious to know, is this a game where we finally look at Thomas and Buccigroki? Did that line figure this out? Texier's up there with them now tonight. I'll be curious to know what he looks like with them because you mentioned earlier, really the only thing that you can point to as what's been successful for Texier so far this year was kind of that 3-game spurt right around the Winter Classic. So if he gets back to that game with Thomas and Booch pick things up, I can see where they go into Colorado and win tonight.
Yeah, I think you're going to see a motivated team. The question that I still have is, are you motivated for 60 minutes?
Yeah.
We've seen periods where the team looks really good, and I expect the first period to be good by St. Louis. But I also expect Colorado to be ready for that. Here's the other thing, and the Thomas Buchnevich thing, I'm looking for that, obviously. I'm looking to see what this 5-man unit defensively looks like, because in the month of January, the Blues have not given up as many goals as you'd think. They've only allowed 37, which is like top 10 in terms of stingiest teams in the National Hockey League. But in their last week and a half, they've allowed 15 total goals in 4 games. That is one area that I'm still uncertain about if they figured this thing out on defense.
And I think this ties into what we're going to get tonight as well. I mean, I mentioned earlier, Joey said like the feeling around the team from when he was on Team A this morning was, feels like it's the trade deadline.
Yeah.
What it means by that is everybody's kind of on pins and needles because at the trade deadline, everybody doesn't know if they're going to be around still or not, or if they're going to be a part of a trade, which is an odd feeling to have as we're going into 4 Nations break.
Yeah.
We're not at
You're
the
still
trade
a month and a half
yet.
away from the deadline.
Yeah, so it's an interesting thing. What I'm curious about, and I know it's the cliche, they got to start fast, but it feels like recently they've been gliding through the first 10 minutes to see what the game's going to be, right? And then all of a sudden you get punched in the face, you're down 1-0, maybe it snowballs into 2-0, and then you don't know how to get back into it, right? I want to see them set the tone tonight. I want to see them be the aggressors from the get-go, from the opening face-off. I want to see them finally come into a game that we haven't seen over the last 3, 4, 5 games and say, we're ready to play. Here's the style this game's going to be, and set that tone from the moment that puck is dropped. Because to me, that's where they've been lacking recently. I don't know if it's so much – it is the starts, but it feels like they've been waiting to see, okay, how are you going to play tonight? Do you guys have your A game? Oh, crap, you got your A game. That was something that we talked about last year with the team.
Yep.
They've gone back to that habit. I'm curious if they shake that tonight.
It's not going to be easy. Colorado's been playing some solid hockey, and even despite not having Mikko Rantanen, have a lot of speed with Nathan McKenna and their newest addition, Martin Necas. I'll be with you tonight. First Community Credit Union pregame at 7. Big thank you once again to Jordan Deacon. We'll be back with you on Monday at 11 a.m. BK and Ferrario. The Fast Lane is next on 101 ESPN.